Welcome to Normal Miracle Show. Host robnoerr. Great to see you. Wasn't planning on streaming tonight, but I got finished with stuff a little early, so we'll see how long I could go. Got a debate lined up tomorrow evening. I know that pleases people. Should be a good one. Going to be on the Crucible. You almost went Adam and Sitch. Good gracious. What were you thinking? Now, full disclosure here. Because I had to stop my Restream service because it was costing me $50 a month and I'm trying to save some money, I'm only going to be on YouTube and Twitch. So that's the only two platforms I'm able to stream simultaneously at this point till I find a workaround to that. Anywho, we'll be talking about the Zero Hedge debate and other things to do with my debates leading up to that with left-wing streamer Destiny, because he's banned on Twitch, and that's one of the only two platforms I'm streaming to. I'm not going to be able to show clips because that'll get you banned, but you could just trust me. You go watch the shit show of the debate if you want. You have a workaround for me, Sage? Hit me up, man. Message me on Twitter or send me an email, rob.noerr@gmail.com. A workaround would be nice, because I can't afford to pay $50 a month anymore. I watched the Rakita debate as well. We could talk about that if you like. So, yeah, we'll talk about some of that debate. My weekend, just to briefly get into it, I had a fantastic weekend. So tomorrow is my son Hank's 3rd birthday, but his party was yesterday, and it's so weird, I took vacation time. Here's what vacation time looks like to me. I got off last Wednesday at 2, and then Thursday I had to do trainings, and then Friday I had to go to the office for about 4 hours. But normally I go into work Saturday at 3, and I took Saturday off and Sunday. I had 2 days off this week, and then came back into work this morning. So I had Saturday and Sunday off, and we had a birthday party for my son Hank, and it was tremendous. It once more illustrates, we talk about serious stuff here, and things, worst case scenario, things could get really, really bad in this country. And they may go that direction. They may. And life's bigger than me and my little group, don't get me wrong. But if I died tomorrow, I've been one of the luckiest people that have ever lived. Every day with my son and wife is truly a blessing. Truly. Making me one of the luckiest people that ever lived. And I see that every day that I'm with them. But for his birthday, I had friends from college that showed up that drove hours just to see my son for his 3rd birthday party. And he had a wonderful time. He really did. It was Paw Patrol themed. It was a really great time. So it just goes to show, there's so many people that made it special, from family to extended family. We held it at where my old landlord, he owns a building, so I got to talk to him. He gave us an incredible deal on the building. It just everyone that, it's odd to me because I talk about a lot of these crazy things, dark, depressing subjects. For example, talking about Epstein, it's so difficult to think about. Imagine being a child victim of Jeffrey Epstein and some of the most elite people in this country. And then maybe you happen to be watching a show like mine, and you hear me talking about how disgusting child predators are, and that our FBI, in my belief, was covering for this and all this stuff. And then I end my show by being like, my life's doing great. It's got to come across as so shallow. And I'm aware of that. I'm aware that not everyone's life's doing great. I am. And I am truly sorry for that. I really am. And I've struggled with that in my life, thinking, why do I deserve, to be as lucky as I am? I don't know what the answer is, ultimately. I don't know. But, I feel that it would be a sin to not appreciate how lucky I am, and to not appreciate the time I have with my family. Thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate the subscription. I really do. You plug through, you do what you can, you understand that it's not as simple. That's why I've never considered myself a streamer. I'm not a red pill person. I'm not sitting here giving people life advice because I don't feel qualified to. I have many problems with mine. You can tell I need to lose some weight. That's one of the things I'm trying for New Year's here. I need to become more well-read. There's tons of things I could do to grow my channel. Tons of things, even more importantly, I could do to grow as a person, to grow as a husband, to grow as a father. So I'm not in a position to lecture anyone or give advice or anything like that. When basically, if someone looks at my life enviously and says, wow, that guy's got a good life, how did he do it? 100% luck. That's how. 100% because I was born into awesome parents and met an awesome wife and have an awesome kid and have awesome friends. That's it. That's my life advice. Get lucky enough to have parents that cared and a community that cared. That's it. That's my big advice. I'm not going to sit here and Andrew Tate you all. I don't know. I don't begrudge those people that want to talk about like how to live your life and stuff like that. But it's not my style. All I can tell you is what worked for me. Maybe you get to happiness in a totally different way. I have no problem with that. As long as you're operating in what I consider a moral framework. You're not intentionally harming others. So that's what my weekend was. A time to reflect for how lucky I am, and it really was. It was really amazing. I know it. Maybe it sounds disingenuous, or maybe it's just like, oh, you always talk about this stuff, but I'm constantly humbled when I see stuff like that. I got off Wednesday. I had to meet my wife to get my car inspected, and my wife was already at the garage with my son. It was the first time when something like this has really happened, where I walked into the garage and my son, who's he's 3, be 3 tomorrow. He saw me and he yells, "Daddy!" and he comes running over and gives me a big hug. I mean, it was just. I'll remember that the rest of my life. That moment. I still remember the first time he rolled over. I remember the first time he said my name. So it was a really great weekend. I had a really good time. So yeah, tomorrow's the big birthday. Unfortunately, I'll be working, but I am gonna FaceTime him, and the kid is like a fat rat with Christmas gifts and birthday gifts. He's got so much stuff that he hasn't even opened yet. So when I get off work, my week is going to be largely occupied by opening random Christmas and birthday gifts. I'm sure putting them together, screwing in batteries, this, that, and the other. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. Also, we've watched the Super Mario Brothers movie probably 3 times a day on every day I've had off in the past 2 weeks. So my son is a big fan of Bowser. Not the 1960s musician, but the King Koopa. He's a big fan. He was scared the first time he watched it, but then once Bowser sings his song and stuff, then he thought he was funny. So it's the Mario movie's good. It's almost not a movie. I was talking to my wife about this. People tune into me for my movie reviews. Let me give you a brief movie review of the Super Mario Brothers movie. It's almost like a script of a movie that's like the skeleton of a movie, but it's missing all the details. But I actually don't mind it, because if you've never seen any Super Mario Brothers game or any Super Mario Brothers media or anything like that, you would probably be looking at this movie like, I can't figure out who these people are. What are their motivations? It seems like, oh, there's a mushroom guy. What's this guy about? Oh, he's just along for the ride now? Oh, thank you so much, Sage Outcast. That's incredibly generous. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. $100. That really means a lot. Thank you so much. It really does. But yeah, so if you're watching this movie, you might be like, who's this guy? Who's that guy? It's like a bunch of Easter eggs. But it makes the movie go so fast and entertaining if you know all those characters, which I do. And for me, I just thought it was great. It didn't seem to like be, I also thought the message of the movie is one, like the theme of it is one that's incredibly unique. I've seen other movies with this sort of theme, but it was refreshing. How many times have you seen a movie like with woke messaging and stuff? Or have you seen a movie where it's like, kids helping their parents or parents helping their kids? The message of this movie is literally these two brothers would do anything for each other. That's it. That's the movie. And it's refreshing. It's simple. You're expecting, it's going to be a love story like Mario and the Princess. No, not really. There's like a little teensy bit, if any. But it's really a story about like these two brothers that the world's kicking, and they come together and, help each other out. They're the best when they're together. Thought it was a fantastic theme. It was just like, how cool is that, So, it's a reasonable movie. I'm not saying it's the greatest piece of art ever, but for like trying to find entertaining stuff for adults and kids to watch, it's up there. Now, having seen it like 12 times now, I'll admit it's running its course. Don't get me wrong. I don't know that it's good enough to watch 3 times a day like my son thinks. But hey, it sure beats watching Coco Melon or something. So I'm not complaining. It's fun. So yeah, who would have thought Mario Brothers is a bro movie? That's what it is. And she brought these brothers. Pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about the Zero Hedge debate. So for those that don't follow me a lot or didn't get a chance to watch me in the past week or so, I've been debating left-wing streamer Destiny quite a bit, and this is the second time that he sort of reached out to me to talk to him about a debate. And the first time I heard scuttlebutt that it was because he's potentially debating Ben Shapiro, so he wanted to talk to me about the Burisma scandal. This time, it was because he was debating Glenn Greenwald and Alex Jones on January 6th, so he wanted to talk to me about January 6th. So we had 2 debates sort of last week or in the past 8-9 days. Thank you so much, Bass Guitar. I really appreciate the follow. I thought you were already following me, man. But that's all right. The first time was the strategy that I knew that Destiny would employ in this debate. Destiny's partners were the Krasenstein brothers, and on the opposite side was Alex Jones, Glenn Greenwald, and Darren Beatty from Revolver. So I debated Destiny these 2 times, and then I did a Spaces with Ian Crossland, who was the moderator for the Zero Hedge debate, and he is also the co-host of Tim Pool's show. So I had an opportunity at like 2 a.m. the other night. I didn't broadcast it on my channel because I was in bed, and someone messaged me and was like, you should get on the Spaces with Ian. He's looking for people. And I told Ian exactly what the debate would be. I told him exactly what Destiny's strategy was going to be. And it's an effective debate strategy. And the strategy is to take a tangentially connected topic and then focus on that. And I can't even really complain because it's a criticism that could be used against me at times, right? People say I'm engaging in whataboutism. So, for example, when I did the panel with Connor and Destiny and Dylan Burns was on it, and the panel was, do you support these Trump indictments or do you think it's a double standard? Most of what I was talking about was how it was a double standard. Now, that's what the topic was, but still, a bunch of people in Destiny's orbit's going to be like, oh, Rob didn't even really talk about the indictments. He talked about the double standard, blah, blah, blah. So what Destiny wanted to talk about was not January 6th, not the day of January 6th, the insurrection. He wanted to talk about the elector scheme. And so after he talked to me, he talked to Rakita Law and was preparing to talk about this elector scheme. It is quite clear that Glenn, Darren, and Alex, well, we'll get to Alex, but they didn't have anything really of substance to say that much on the elector scheme. And that's where Destiny and then the Krasensteins ended up going. At least at the beginning of the debate, they were trying to focus on that. And it is a separate issue to January 6th. You see, what they try to do is they try to pile in a bunch of stuff, right? And say all of this together is what makes this a problem. But then that's not really true, because if you started to break it down and you said, oh, okay, so then if January 6th happens, but there was never this electors, this idea of alternate slates of electors, then it's not an insurrection? Then it's not a... And of course they'd be like, well, no, that's not what we're saying. And you're like, oh, okay. So then let's focus on January 6th and whether or not it was an insurrection. And even when I debated Destiny, he tried to blatantly do this when I was saying, like, look, the January 6th committee and all these places called January 6th and insurrection. And he said, no, that's just like crazy Rachel Maddow people. That's not true. The actual January 6th committee titled their, like, actual document that they put out, the January 6th insurrection. And the reason it matters is this, right? Again, I'll say this over and over again, and people could claim I'm full of shit. I don't care. The people that watch me a lot know this. I don't really give a shit about Donald Trump. I give a shit that he, because of who he was treated with corruption by our corrupt establishment. That's what I care about. Presidents come and go. This corrupt establishment is here to stay unless something's done about it. I talk about this all the time, and I know that the fanboys of people I debate who don't follow me on a day-to-day basis and don't see that I've actually probably pushed back stronger against Trump supporters, and not just afterwards. I'm not just some grifter that's like, oh boy, now I could attach myself to Ron DeSantis, and I could, even though I kissed Trump's ass for years, now I could insult him. I called Trump out during his presidency when it mattered all the time. Still call him out. I still would rather see both Vivek and DeSantis as the candidate than Donald Trump. What they don't understand is this, and I got into a bit of a discussion yesterday with someone in real life about this. If I want Vivek Ramaswamy or Ron DeSantis as president, the number one path to that occurring is for Trump to be incarcerated tomorrow and then shivved in prison. If that happens, it is all but a 100% likely outcome that DeSantis probably, or Vivek or something like that, would win. Almost guaranteed. So the idea that I'm fighting tooth and nail because I need Trump to be the next president is just not true. I'm fighting because it's the right thing to do. I'm arguing against corruption, is what I'm doing. Right? Who are we talking about here? Anyways, so given that, I don't mind arguing about the alternate electors. I thought Nick Rikita did a great job talking to Destiny in his debate about the alternate electors theory. But what about all the people that are languishing in prison right now from January 6th? What about them? The alternate electors has zero to do. My guess is the average person that attended the January 6th rally, that either went into the Capitol or not, probably knew next to nothing about alternate electors. They probably thought the election was stolen and they wanted it stopped. They wanted the count stopped. But to the extent that they knew that there may have been alternate electors, they certainly weren't familiar with, was it fraudulent? What was the process through which these electors were pushed? That's why it's important to focus on the day of January 6th and whether or not it was an insurrection, which it clearly wasn't. Right, they may have had an idea that Pence could do something, right. But the idea that they were intimately intertangled with an alternate election, it's just nonsense. So if you say, well, it's only an insurrection or a coup, in so much as Trump had these alternate electors, let's say that for the sake of argument, I conceded that and then said, okay, well, what about this grandma that walked into the Capitol and didn't commit any violence? So she's looking at 6 months in jail. What about that? Was she an insurrectionist? That's the debate. That's the question. The largest task force in history, that FBI task force that's set up to go after January 6 people, it's not like that task force wouldn't have been set up had Donald Trump and his team not came up with alternate electors. That's nonsense. They are saying on face that the day of January 6th was an insurrection. And of course, there wasn't sufficient pushback to that level from the other side of the debate, but it's neither here nor there. So, in general, I think that when I talked to Destiny in his preparation, I will say this. Destiny was very smart to pick me because 95% of the arguments I made were the arguments that were brought up by the right side of the debate. By right, I don't mean winning side. I mean the non-establishment side, the MAGA side. So, as far as the performances of the debate, look, I have to call a spade a spade. I'm sorry to do this, but Destiny and the Krasenstein side of the debate won the debate. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not saying this to suck up to Destiny. That's absolute bullshit. I predicted that Glenn Greenwald would do very good and Alex would do okay, and that they would win that side of the debate. I was wrong. The primary reason for this was I'm going out on a limb and guessing. It doesn't really matter if I'm right about this, but I think Alex Jones was shit-faced. But regardless if it was because he was drunk or just because it's his natural personality, he did a terrible job. Absolute terrible job. Now, if you're a fan of Alex Jones and you have which I am a fan of Alex Jones, I'll be honest, but if you just have the ultimate fuck you, I'm done talking with the left mindset, then you might say, I don't mind what Alex Jones did. He's just like, I'm not going to treat you all with any respect. The only thing that's odd is at the beginning of the debate, Alex was like, I just want to thank Zero Hedge and, having these sorts of debates and discussing ideas is very important. Okay, well, you didn't really do that. Basically he was doing what I get accused of doing, which, someone would be like, well, Trump, said fight like hell and blah, blah, blah. And Alex would be like, whoa, what about illegal immigrants voting, huh? That's the real coup, illegal immigrants. And it's like, right. I don't deny that you have a point, Alex, but that's clearly not even tangentially connected to this topic of whether or not January 6th was an insurrection. Someone in the audience help me out here. Here's my impression of what I think happened with Alex Jones. So the debate was in person in Austin. Maybe if you're a bigger follower of Alex Jones than me, you'll know this. I believe Alex Jones films his show in Austin. And based on a couple little things he said throughout the debate, I think they may have been in his studio. Am I wrong about that? Does anyone know if that's the case or if I'm just completely off base? I think Alex treated this like he treats like when he goes on Rogan's podcast. Yeah, I think it was the InfoWars studio. And so he was like, I'm going to have some people coming in and some that agree and some that disagree. We're all going to have a great time. And Alex is a dude that's talking to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people a day. So he's not looking at this debate like, wow, here's a really important event to get my message out to a different group of people. He's looking at it like, I did my show all day. Now I got these people coming in. We're going to drink some scotch and smoke some cigars. We're just going to yell about freedom. And yeah, like, for example, when Glenn cut out, he was like, Glenn, we're going to get back to you. Look, let's get them up back on there, boys, blah, blah, blah. So he was talking like the production team was his. Thank you, Face. I really appreciate Two-Face. I appreciate it. Appreciate the sub. I really do. So I think that he didn't take it that seriously. That's no excuse, regardless of maybe he did take it seriously. I'm just giving you what my impression was. He did not do his side any benefits. And I think Glenn was remote. And when you're remote, what happens is, by the very nature, if someone's talking over you, it kind of cuts you out. They're going to be heard more than you. And it's harder to get a word in edgewise. So Glenn was really on a back foot because of Alex being so bombastic to get a word in edgewise. And you could tell Darren Beatty from Revolver was probably a little frustrated with Alex, but probably likes Alex. And Darren would be making a good point, and Alex, Darren would be like, well, actually, with this Ray Ep piece, what we looked at, and Alex would be like, let me cut you off there, Darren, and blah, 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 blah. And then, and that's very difficult to deal with. And I've had that happen. And it's actually the most frustrated I get on a panel. It's frustrating when you keep getting interrupted from the other side. But I'm so used to that. I'm usually pretty good. But what's really frustrating is when it's someone from your own side. So when you're going back and forth, you're setting up an argument with someone and you're like, well, what about this? And they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, but if you think that, then, and then all of a sudden your partner's like, hold on a minute, let me step in here. And then they just go in a completely different direction. And then the debate goes elsewhere for 6 minutes. And it's like, okay, back to you. And you're like, yeah, I kind of forgot where I was. And I felt like Darren was getting some of that treatment. Ian, as a moderator, there's so many big personalities on that stage. It takes a person who's very assertive as a moderator to step in and be like, listen, no. And Ian did it a handful of times, but it quickly got out of hand. And let's not kid ourselves. The vast bulk of the culprit was Alex Jones. It was. And I say that as someone who likes Alex Jones. I'm just calling a spade a spade. So I thought Glenn and Darren, to a lesser extent, were making good arguments, but they weren't really getting an amount of substantial time to make them more significantly. They were almost forced to give more of overview type arguments. Now, let me say this. That's not to defend them. Perhaps that's all they were capable of. I don't know. The excuse of, well, they would have done better if Alex wasn't there, that could well be true. But that's not how it played out. And I can't sit here and make excuses. And I understand it will piss a lot of people off to hear me say this, but I thought Destiny did the best out of the 6 people there. And I thought the Krasensteins did much better than I expected. That's the truth. And if that, I don't know how else to say this other than when I try to evaluate debate, I clearly have a bias. Clearly. And that bias ultimately, no matter how hard I try to suppress it, will affect who I think did the best in a debate. It will. However, I try my best to suppress it as much as possible and give an honest reflection. And I have practiced doing such because this is what you have to do when you're a judge in the debate community in college. I can't tell you how many times I voted for teams that were making arguments that I absolutely despised. But I felt in the context of that round, they won the argument. And so that's what I was trying to do. You think Glenn did better than Destiny? I disagree. I think Glenn was talking more in overviews. He was saying this is how coups normally look. And he was very condescending to Destiny, which is fine. Destiny's certainly condescending to me. But he was very condescending, and I thought that it appeared as if the Krasensteins and Destinys were, for example, when they're talking about the amount of court cases. They're like, there were 31 court cases heard by 17 different judges, and 26 of them were, not on standing. Of the 5 that were found of standing, blah, blah, blah. And they're going into specific details. And Glenn's argument's more like, but you don't see how corrupt the system is. Now, I ultimately agree with Glenn and his argument, and I think he's doing good. But I just thought that optically, and when it came to what I call line-by-line debate, the actual debate tit for tat, I thought that the left side won. That's it. Am I being accused of being a pearl clutcher? Is that what I'm doing? I don't know how I'm clutching pearls if you're accusing me. Probably someone else, I would think. Oh, you are. You're accusing me of being a pearl clutcher. Hey, whatever. Like, if you don't like my take on the debate, that's absolutely fine. You're certainly entitled to your own opinion. I'm just giving my honest... I'm now left-winger. My honest... another full disclosure, I missed, the last 20 minutes of the debate, and I understand there was some contentious stuff. Sandy Hook stuff. I think someone told me that Destiny blamed Alex for Ashley Babbitt's death. I'm a concern troll now. There's nothing to do with concern troll. I don't know what people are saying. I'm saying I thought one side did better than the debate than the other. How the hell does that make me a concern troll? I don't give a shit if people are making fun of each other. Thanks so much, Gizmo. I appreciate it. I don't. I kind of find a lot of what Alex was saying to be really funny. But I'm trying to view it as, if I'm someone that's trying to be objective, like I don't know much about this topic, and I watched that debate, I would have probably said, well, the one side of the debate tried to argue facts and stuff, and the other side had a guy that just kept screaming about nonsense and interrupting him the whole time. Now, one of the things I found humorous about the debate, if you watched particularly the last debate I had with Destiny, he literally interrupts me every 3 seconds. Constantly. He starts off that debate being like, okay, Rob, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you ask me a series of questions, and then I will ask you a series of questions. And I said, that sounds eminently fair. Let's do it that way. And within 2 minutes, it's just him interrupting me. I said Glenn was condescending. I don't mind that. I said, and Destiny's condescending to me. I don't mind that Glenn was condescending. It doesn't affect me. I don't give a shit. Destiny calls me the worst bad faith debater he's seen. So what I give a fuck if Glenn... I was just saying, from someone who's watching from the outside, it would seem like, well, this side of the debate's trying to argue facts, and this side of the debate's just sort of insulting them and talking about overarching themes. Yeah, that's very similar. Malala gets it there. Destiny asks me a question, I start to answer, and 3 seconds later it goes, wait, so you don't know, blah, blah, blah. That's the sort of bullshit. Why bring it up? Because I was giving my review of the debate. Yeah, I missed that part, but that's fucked up if Destiny said that, yeah. So the last 25 minutes of the debate, my son really wanted to hang out, so I shut off the debate, because it didn't seem like it was going anywhere. Alex calling Destiny Ding Dong was funny. That was pretty funny. Thank you so much for the super chat, Dave. Says, a huge Alex Jones fan. Would have been my first choice as a debater. Yeah, I agree. I don't, and I'll admit, I thought Alex would have done better than he did. However, yeah, you don't really think of Alex. Listen, I say this. Not everyone has the same skill set, right? Not everyone who's really smart would be a great streamer. Not everyone who's a great streamer will be a great debater. Not everyone who's a great commentator will be a great debater. Not everyone who's a great debater is the smartest person in the world. All of that shit's true. There are people, some of the smartest people I know in the world, the smartest, wisest people that could tear your engine apart and put it back together in a day, and could have like photographic memory about things like geography or things like nature. There are people I could go hunting with that could tell me stuff about wildlife that blows my mind. It's like reading a biology book. They couldn't figure out if you gave them a 3-month lesson on how to like stream something to YouTube. I'm actually going through this right now. A guy who wants to start streaming, an older gentleman who I think will, not political stuff, just wants to talk about sort of hunting and carpentry and stuff like that. And he's interested in starting a YouTube show. And he's really struggling. He doesn't really understand how the internet works. Not everyone, has the same skill set, and that's okay. I don't think Alex is really a debater. That's not his thing. Alex is someone who is a researcher. Alex is someone who's at his best is able to take difficult concepts and in a truthful way explain them to you in one of the most entertaining and passionate ways that you could believe. He is unbelievably brave to confront corruption to its face for as many years as he has. He's not right about everything. He's certainly fucking crazy at times, but so am I, so, whatever. But I don't know that that's the type of guy you want as your partner in a serious debate. I don't know. I'll say this. I reached out to Ian when Glenn's feed went out and was like, if they don't mind, bring me on. I'm going to say something that's going to sound very conceited, but I'm just going to call it out. I think at this point I might be top 3 conservative debater in the entire online sphere. There are certain topics, like if I'm debating some legal topic, I would take Rakita Law over me any day of the week. No doubt. But as far as general political discussion, I just don't know. I think me and Glenn Greenwald would have done an amazing job. I think my debate with Destiny was much better than what that panel put forth to. And I don't say that as someone who's like, I'm the man, I want to brag. That's not why I'm saying that. I'm saying it because I think it's true. I think I handled Destiny in the 2 debates that I had on this very topic. The first one, which he just said, you want to talk about January 6th? I said yes, and it was all about the Eastman memo, which, again, isn't something that I'm very familiar with. I know the bare bones of it, but it's not something I've read up, like the Durham report or the IG report or, a bunch of the emails on Burisma and stuff like that. That stuff I have no excuse. I've been studying up on. But I'll be honest, with the elector stuff, that's not what I expected to talk about. But I thought I did fine. I thought I was making, in a less sophisticated way, very similar arguments that Rakita made with Destiny when they streamed. Far less sophisticated. But I'm not a lawyer. But the second debate, I understand Destiny's audience thinks that he crushed me in that debate. I don't even think it was close. Now, I'm gonna do something risky. I'm gonna play the summary of the debate, the final 10 minutes of the debate with me and Destiny, the second one. I'm gonna play audio only. It's me and this left-wing streamer talking. So let me see if I can find this. The argument that I make here is the number 1 argument against the insurrection narrative. And I can't figure out why more people aren't making this argument and why it wasn't the central argument in this panel debate. Your position. Now, what's going to happen here is, after I'm getting cut off the entire time, this whole debate, I'm going to summarize Destiny's position and then my position. That's what I'm going to do. Okay? You'll hear that he agrees when I summarize his position. Yes, that is my position. right? And then we'll talk about, and then I'm going to have a debate tomorrow with Pisco, and Pisco's probably watching right now. Absolutely fine. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not going to have time to do massive amounts of research because I'm working all day tomorrow. So what you hear is what you get. I don't need subterfuge. So I don't care. His face isn't here, so we'll just play it. Here we go. I will steelman your position again. Your position is as follows. The FBI was aware that, and other agencies, I think you'll agree, that's what's been testified to, that other agencies in the FBI were aware that there was going to be some amount of people, we'll call it a small amount of people, that were going to be involved in a violent attempt to overthrow the government. They were also aware that there was going to be a massive rally with potentially hundreds of thousands of people that was happening elsewhere in D.C., right? They changed, this isn't part of your argument, but I don't think you dispute this. They changed the way their policies traditionally happen and chose not to share that intelligence with Stephen's son. And your belief is the reason they did that was because they thought it was just a handful of people and it wasn't worth it. Then January 6th occurs, and the people start going, and it starts getting violent. The National Guard's right there. Stephen's son's begging, please, 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 send me National Guard people. My people are being beaten up. We need to protect the Capitol. He's calling a chain of command, and he's being repeatedly told, well, we can't do this for optics. And your argument is that's what you believe, that these people testified to that, and the reason was they were confused of the on-the-ground situation, and they were afraid it would make them look bad for the National Guard to be deployed at the Capitol because potentially it could look like Trump mobilizing the military or something. Is that a fair summation of your argument?
Yeah, close enough. Yeah.
Okay, my argument is that I think that that is not the most likely scenario because I refuse to believe that competent people that have been career people involved in defense, whether it be in the military, whether it be, people that are in the FBI and things like that, one, they would have beforehand, if they had what they thought was credible information that people were going to try to violently overthrow the government, they would have done more than usual, not less than usual, to relay that evidence to the people tasked with security. And secondly, the people that were charged with defense when they saw a violent mob getting into the Capitol that they were worried was going to hurt government officials would have done more to make sure that every personnel possible be there instead of being more concerned about optics. I refuse to believe that they said, well, we think that these people might get in and they may literally hurt members of Congress, but we're more concerned about optics. I think that that would require such a level of incompetence and stupidity of these officials that it beggars belief that that could be the case. And I think my explanation is much more plausible. I will steal. Now, when you actually don't interrupt me every 5 seconds and I can make the argument, you could see that I think 90% of reasonable people would say that I'm absolutely right. The unenviable position that Destiny is forced to argue is as follows. The FBI had evidence that there was a coup about to occur, an insurrection, and that they may harm or kill members of Congress. But they chose not to share that data with the people charged with defense. Why? Well, Destiny says because they thought only a handful of people were going to be there. That's not true. I found documents today that actually show that's not true. They were briefed that they expected tens of thousands of people to be there. But Destiny's argument is, oh, but they thought they were going to be 2 miles away, so it didn't matter. Think about this claim for a minute. And there's two parts to this. There is leading up to January 6th and what the FBI knew and the actions they didn't take. And then there's once the riot occurs on January 6th and not deploying the National Guard. So we'll get to that in a second. This first part is, Destiny's argument is, the FBI was aware that there was about to be a violent insurrection that may harm members of Congress and was going to attempt to overthrow the government. But it was only a handful of people in the Proud Boys and the Three Percenters and the Oath Keepers. And so the FBI decided to do less than usual. Less than usual. Normally, anytime there's going to be a Washington sports team won the championship, there's going to be a parade. They have an interagency meeting that talks about contingency plans where they share all the intel and data they have. One of the people that's always involved with that is the premier person tasked with defense of the Capitol City Police Chief, Stephen Sund. Sund says that he always got these briefings if there were going to be protests or rallies in town. But not this time. This time, the FBI didn't inform him. We have credible evidence that there's about to be an attempt to overthrow the government and physically attack Congress people. Why would they do less than normal? Now, brief step back. What we're left with here is only two possible explanations for why this occurred. One, because, and if you followed me, you'll know this is always the excuse. Anytime we have these intel agencies that behave improperly, that almost always goes to harming Trump and protecting his allies. The first explanation is they're massively incompetent. Well, they didn't think it was important to report that an insurrection was about to happen. Whoops, they're bad. Oh well, moving forward. That's Destiny's explanation. They thought it was only going to be a handful of people, and they weren't worried about the hundreds of thousands of other people. That's going to be their explanation. And Destiny's like, yeah, I buy that. Or my explanation, which is, much like the Whitmer case, they wanted this to go forward. That way they could say, see, look how bad MAGA people are. Just like they did with the Whitmer case. Same thing. What explanation seems more possible? Again, imagine that you're a legitimate FBI person. You really care about the safety of this country. And you're really afraid that you have agents embedded in these organizations and they're telling you, like, dude, they're about to overthrow the government. They're going to overthrow the government. And you hear this. What kind of person would you be to be like, you know what, though? Yeah, I would like an early weekend. I really had a brunch I wanted to get to. So, yeah, I'm just not going to disclose this information to the people tasked with security. What kind of insanity is that? How anyone could believe that with a straight face? And that's the argument. That's the argument they're believing. Well, they were just incompetent. They made mistakes. It's beyond belief. It's beyond belief. The FBI is not responsible for the National Guard. Right. So that's why I'm bifurcating it into two different groups, two scenarios. Now, had the FBI disclosed this information to Sun, then there would have been an appropriate level of National Guard. Then no one would have got into the Capitol. Then we wouldn't talk about January 6th as an insurrection. It would have been another situation where it was a political riot that would have looked great, rightfully so. But it would have been theoretically treated like May 30th, 2020. Remember when a bunch of violent left-wingers used actual lethal weapons to try to break into the White House? But there was a sufficient police response that they were unable to break through. So no one called it an insurrection. The only reason that this is seen as bad as it is because they broke through the police. If it would have just been they clashed with police for an hour, got their ass handed to them, and some got arrested, that would have been that. But they needed the optics of going into the Capitol. That's what triggered the insurrection narrative. That's what triggered the largest task force in the history of our country. Law enforcement task force in the FBI. Thousands of people arrested. Which led to censorship of criticisms of the election. All in the name of you're spurring on an insurrection. Which is leading to attacking the leading candidate at this point for the opposition to Joe Biden. B. Slimone said, the problem is your speculation isn't fact. It's speculation. A flat earther could make the same info and say the FBI's hiding info here just like they're hiding. I'm not speculating. And this is what Destiny keeps saying, you don't have evidence. Here's evidence. The FBI did not disclose. The FBI is currently claiming in court filings against people like those in the Proud Boys. And the Colorado court is also claiming that the FBI had ample evidence that there was going to be an insurrection January 6th. B. Slimone, do you agree or disagree? You're saying that I'm speculating. Is that a fact or not? I'm going to get a drink and give you a chance to respond. Now, I will admit, sometimes it takes longer to type or there's a lag. That's a fact. That's beyond dispute. If you like, I can bring up the Colorado court case right now and show you that that's what they say. That's number one. Number two is, They did not brief the one guy who was most in charge with providing defense for the Capitol. Stephen Sund. Right, he says the first part is fact. The second part is they didn't act. That also is a fact. Now Beast Lamone says, so you're speculating as to their motivation. That's true, I am. But we do this all the time. This constantly happens. For example, the entire January 6th is an insurrection narrative saying that Trump engaged in insurrection. You ready for this? Is speculating as to Trump's motivations. It says Trump did this, Trump did this, Trump did this. Therefore, he was doing it to engage in an insurrection. And you don't say, this is all flat earther bullshit. It's all speculation. You say, yep, they need to charge him with a crime. He needs to be kept off the ballot. You're speculating as to his motive. In fact, you could hear all throughout the Zero Hedge debate and all throughout when I debated Destiny, the elector scheme hinges on the idea of Trump knew he lost the election. We know what Trump knew. We know he knew that he lost. I disagree. I think he truly believes that he lost. Destiny and them say, no, we know he knows he didn't. That's speculation. But you and other people on the left are fine with that speculation. So when we have agreed upon facts, now we're trying to come up with what is the most likely explanation for why these facts occurred. What is the most likely explanation for why the FBI had information that an insurrection was about to commence, but chose not to relay that information to the people providing security? So now we will debate what is the most likely reason that that occurred, right? Destiny's reason, the left's reason, the Democrats' reason is because they're incompetent. They're just really bad at their jobs. They're really stupid. Destiny says, see, they only thought that there was going to be a couple dozen people or so involved in this insurrection plot. So they didn't feel it was necessary to tell the Capital City Police Chief. Even though they would have intelligence briefings if it was a normal protest rally, and they didn't have information there was about to be an attack on the government. That sounds like horseshit. That sounds literally unbelievable. Like, not unbelievable like, wow, I can't believe that happened. Unbelievable like, I don't believe it. I don't believe that career FBI officials were like, hey, we have credible evidence the government's about to be overthrown. And we also know that tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people are going to be in the area. But we're just not going to say anything. My theory is, well, the reason they didn't do anything is much like the Whitmer case and case after case in the FBI's history where they have entrapped people. They wanted people to get out of hand so they could use it as an excuse to then target them through law enforcement. Now, you might say, but Rob, there's no evidence of that. No, for example, no one in the FBI said, yes, we intentionally allowed an insurrection to occur so that we could try to arrest people. And that's true. You're right. No one in the FBI who was investigating themselves and the January 6th committee that their allies were investigating them, very loosely I use that term, they didn't admit that. You're right. They said, well, the reason is optics. And there Beast Lamone says, well, the reason is because a bunch of people testified under oath. Their testimony is nonsensical. There are whistleblowers. Stephen Sund is in effect a whistleblower. Then there's other problems. Why would so that's just the FBI leading up to it. What I didn't even get in, and someone mentioned this, if you take Representative Biggs, who did an interview with Tucker Carlson, now listen, take this with a grain of salt. But here is a congressperson saying, we can't publicly show the evidence yet because there's criminal investigations going on. But there were over 200 FBI assets in the crowd, including, he claims, assets in the building, whose job it was, once the MAGA people were left into the Capitol, to directly usher them to, like, Speaker Pelosi's office. Biggs claims they have talked to whistleblowers, but because it's an ongoing investigation, they can't disclose it yet. But regardless if there's whistleblowers or not, imagine this. Like, imagine that there is a police department. And they're accused... Did you ever watch... I'm going to date myself. Anybody ever watch the show The Shield? I used to love The Shield. Michael Chiklis, he ran this... I forget where they were. LA, maybe. He runs this anti-drug task force. But the task force is insanely corrupt. It's just really corrupt task force. Like, and it's a brutal show. The Shield's a brutal show. Like, if I could explain it... I'm going to spoil the first episode of The Shield for you. At the end of the first episode of The Shield, they kill a legitimate police officer on purpose because he's going to rat them out for being corrupt. So they murder this innocent guy. And then, like, the show kind of tries then to make these characters as unsympathetic as possible in the first episode and then try to make you a little more sympathetic to them going forward. But ultimately, it doesn't really work. They're still scumbags. But imagine, though, in that sort of world, so you have this corrupt task force, you know, and they're accused of planting drugs, right? And all of them testify and they say, Your Honor, we didn't plant those drugs. What happened was we were going to take those drugs back to evidence lockup, right? We were going to, and we each had a pocket full of drugs, and it fell out of our pockets. Each of us, all four of us, it happened to all fall out of our pockets at the exact same time, onto this guy's lap in the back of the police car, and then the other officers didn't know that it fell out of our pockets, and so they arrested him, and that's our explanation for how it happened. And you would say, oh, they testified to that under oath. None of them admitted they did it for nefarious reasons. Case closed. Case closed. Nothing to look at here. That's it. They're police officers. They're law enforcement. They testified they did no wrong. Must be true. And you would be looking at that and saying, but the chances of that happening, that's so beyond the pale. There's no way that happened. No way. And these people would say, that's flat earther shit. That's speculation. They were under oath. They testified under oath. So it must be true. It must be true what they said. We just have to believe that the FBI was like, yeah, we heard about this insurrection, but, you know, we were just busy. And we didn't think it was that big of a deal. Now we think it's like the biggest deal in the world. But back then, we didn't think it was that big of a deal. So we just didn't say anything. It's beyond the pale. It's beyond belief. Maybe you could make this argument if it's like a day one FBI guy and he's just confused and nervous. These are people at the top levels of the FBI. SM Veritas, how many times have you heard me debate these people, whether it be the illegal FISA warrants against Trump or the granting of everyone immunity and all the problems with the Hillary investigation or, you know, the intentionally sitting on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and every single time the official Democrat narrative is they're just incredibly incompetent. It's just incompetence. Why are you so worked up, Rob? Don't think that our FBI is corrupt. They're just literally incompetent beyond belief. And it almost always goes against Donald Trump and MAGA-type people. It's just pure coincidence that they're incredibly incompetent. Not to mention that testifying under oath was a partisan committee that picked and chose who they wanted to hear from, that picked and chose what evidence they made public to the American people, and are now claiming they've lost a lot of the testimony and things like that occurred behind closed doors. So they just want to put little snippets out there and people go, that's good enough for us. The FBI said they did no wrong, and they said it under oath, therefore they did no wrong. Dr. Fauci testified under oath that the United States didn't fund gain of function. That was bullshit. Let's say that maybe, just maybe this one time, in the history we've seen of the FBI going after Trump for 7+ years, this was just a coincidence. They're incredibly incompetent. They forgot that they were supposed to share evidence that there was an insurrection. They dropped the ball. Okay, fine. Now let's move on to the day of January 6th. Okay, now the National Guard's there, but they're not part of the defense. They're 2 blocks away. The riot starts to get out of hand. The Capital City police officer's son, chief of police, who, by the way, requested the National Guard on January 4th and was denied by the Sergeant-at-Arms under Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, which is in the official documentation. He starts requesting the Guard. No. My speculation absolutely requires penalty if I'm wrong. Oh, I see what you're saying. My mistake. You're saying I can say what I want here and I won't go. So what? It's irrelevant. There also is no speculation for them lying under oath. For example, James Comey lied under oath. What was his punishment? Andy McCabe lied under oath. What was his punishment? What was the guy in charge of the NSA that said that the NSA didn't collect data on Americans? Remember, he said not willingly. That was a lie. He lied under oath. What was his punishment? Show me the FBI people that have been punished that have lied under oath. McCabe, Comey. Show me the intelligence agency people that have lied under oath and got in trouble. Show me. No, his explanation, again, that's nothing. That's just saying, I believe the people at the FBI and the DOJ aren't charging the other people at the FBI if they lied under oath. Therefore, I trust them. So anyways, moving on to the day of January 6th. So now we're requesting. And all these people through this chain of command. Guys at the Army. Guys at the National Guard. All these people are like, well, we can't do this for optics. We have to wait. We have to delay. We have to delay. Here's the enviable argument. This one's even worse. This one's even worse than the FBI argument. You ready? Here's the argument. These people in this chain of command, and there are many, they legitimately thought, oh my God, this is an attack on our capital. Some of them may have even been aware of the FBI's intelligence, that there was about to be an insurrection. But regardless if they are aware of that prior intelligence or not, they're saying it was their belief. They're looking at the situation like, my God, they may kill Congress people. They may harm Congress people. They may take over the government. That's their belief. Clapper was the guy I was thinking of. Thanks, Ithaca. So imagine this. Let's just say I'm Rob Noerr, and I'm the liaison for the Sergeant at Arms to the National Guard. And for whatever reason, I'm in the chain of command. And so the Capital City Chief Police calls me on January 6th and says, Rob, my God, we're being overwhelmed. The National Guard's right there. Can you deploy them? And I say, you know, as bad as it looks right now, and we know they might get in there and harm Mike Pence or some other congressperson, I really don't think that we could send the National Guard because, you know, optics. So, sorry, Mike Pence, you may have to die today. Sorry, because optics. Why do I even have to respond to how stupid this is? Go ahead, bass guitar. What am I missing? Can you hop on Discord? Yeah, it's probably going to crash my computer, but let's give her a whirl. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure my audio's set up correctly here.
Okay.
All right.
Let me kill the stream.
All right. I think I could hear you. Go for it. What am I missing? You there?
I hope I don't crash your computer.
No. Okay, so go ahead. What am I missing?
Yep. There we go. Cool.
Can you hear me?
Well, first off, Dutch was the GOAT.
Dutch? Oh, from he gets screwed over there at the end, doesn't he?
I can't hear you on Discord.
Oh,
from the Shield.
Yeah, let me 1 second. Maybe my thing's screwed up here on Discord. Check. Yeah, you should be able to hear me. Check your settings, your audio settings on Discord. My mic should be coming through there.
No.
I don't know. We'll have to try to make it work as good as possible then, because on my end, when I check my mic on Discord, it's working. So,
sorry, I'm a freaking boomer with Discord.
Well, if you could hear me, at least get out the part that's important that you think I'm missing. If that's all we get to.
Okay. Hopefully I can. Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
All right. So the big thing is, just so you know, I can't hear you on Discord. So I'm going to have to hear you on the stream, so it's going to get weird. All right. So first off, the initial order, when Trump, hang on, I got to mute myself and I'll have to come back. Hang on. Okay. On January 3rd,
can you hear me yet?
There was an initial deployment for the DC National Guard. When Trump had a meeting. Sorry, what was that?
I don't know if we'll be able to do this because the delay is going to be so significant. It's like 10 seconds. So if you can hear me now, here's what we're going to do. Please just say your piece. Say what you got to say. Right. Don't go more than 5 minutes. Say what you got to say. Then I'll let you go and respond. That's going to be the only way I think that we could do this.
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, yeah. And I'll try to keep it short. So, okay, so on January 3rd, there was a meeting where they all talked about like deploying the National Guard before, and that's where you hear Trump saying, "Okay, yeah, give them whatever they need." Something that's super critical there is the initial mission that was given for the National Guard on that day, and that was to protect the Trump supporters, to protect the protesters who are exercising their First Amendment right. Both Mark Meadows and Acting Secretary of Defense Miller said. They both said that was the case. So when Bowser and Sund were requesting the DC National Guard to deploy on January 6th, that was the operating mission. And they were asking for the DC National Guard to go and stop the Trump supporters. I think that is a super critical reason for the delay. And you can see that when Trump tweeted out, "Go home," within minutes they changed and they released the National Guard. I got more info on it, but it's without the back and forth, it's gonna be tough.
Okay, that's laughably stupid if you could still hear me. Because one, what happened was Trump did initially say that, but it's stupid to think that if the Guard was there to protect supporters of Trump, which it was his belief, and by the way, there was briefing that there were going to be anti-Trump people that were there as well. So I'll go through, if you want later, the actual findings of what the timeline was. We can go through it. So they thought all up into this, there was going to be like 4 different pro-Trump groups and 2 different anti-Trump groups. And so one of the things that you heard a lot of chatter, not just amongst pro-Trump groups that were growing in Slack channels, Telegram channels, and things like that, but also that was being talked about in this meetings, and including by Trump, was his fear that, like we almost always saw, when Trump supporters gather, there will be agitators that seek to fight them. And so it is true that Trump's initial comment was, "I want the National Guard there," because he was afraid that what was going to happen was there would be a bunch of violence because a bunch of Antifa-type people would attack them. Now, this request was ultimately denied. And then there was a separate, I believe you're right that was on the 3rd, but then there was a separate request that was made by Sund on the 4th. And that request was denied by both the Sergeant at Arms under Nancy Pelosi and under Mitch McConnell. So the Senate and the House Sergeant at Arms. And that was just to provide security in general. Now, the idea of these National Guard people were there to provide security for Trump supporters in the event that militants started to beat them, it is nonsensical to believe that if it was the Trump supporters that started to attack the Capitol Police, that the National Guard wouldn't have the ability to intervene, or that somehow they would intervene on the side of Trump supporters. None of that makes sense. Regardless, that was the situation going into the 6th. The FBI failed to disclose to Sund that there was credible evidence from insiders in organizations that they thought there was literally going to be an attack on the lives of Congress people and people like Mike Pence, and there was going to be an attempted overthrow of the government. That was failed to be disclosed. Despite that, Sund did request National Guard presence. He had that denied. So the only people that we know were literally requesting up until January 6th the National Guard was Capitol Chief Police Sund and Donald Trump. That's it going into the 6th. Then the 6th occurs, so the National Guard is there just on traffic duty watching. Sund starts requesting the National Guard. He's calling repeatedly people, and he's being told for optics and other reasons that they can't deploy. Now, your argument seems to be, well, the reason is because Trump had initially suggested that they be there to protect Trump supporters from would-be violent left-wing agitators. And therefore, they were concerned that the optics would be that these people would be there, the National Guard, to help Trump. But that's not going to get you anywhere, because if you have a serious good faith belief that this isn't just a riot, but that actual Congress people's lives are in danger, and you refuse to act to allow appropriate security in the moment because you're afraid that it will be bad for optics, it beggars belief. I want you to tell me any military personnel or security personnel, let alone those at the highest level of the U.S. government, that would be willing to jeopardize their charges, the lives of the people they're sworn to protect, because they're afraid it would look bad. Can you give me any other example in history of any competent security personnel making a decision like that?
I think it's reasonable. By the way, I fixed my Discord, so I can hear you now on Discord. So I think... sorry, I got distracted. So I'm not saying that it was necessarily because of the optics. What I'm saying is that the original mission was to protect Trump supporters. And when Bowser and Sun were putting in the requests, I think that was the cause of the delay, was they were like, well, because let's face it, the army secretary, he can't go against the order of the president. We don't want them going against the order of the president. So if the order of the president was protect the Trump supporters, and Bowser and Sun are saying stop the Trump supporters, what's the army secretary going to do? That is absolutely. I don't like. It's some fantasy land you're living in. So your argument is this. So then from that point forward, when Trump said, hey, I'm afraid agitators might come and harm Trump supporters, I'd like the National Guard there to ensure peace, that the Trump supporters aren't beaten. From that point forward, they're sitting around confused saying, oh my God, these Trump supporters are going to kill Mike Pence, but we can't deploy the National Guard because Trump said we could only use the National Guard to protect Trump supporters. So our hands are tied. Why did they ever deploy? Then why did they ever deploy? So they directly violated Trump's orders when they inevitably deploy, right? So I've got a question for you. I asked you first, but then I'll answer your question. Okay. I think there was a change of policy. Oh, so Trump directed the change in policy? Do you think that Trump ever governed by tweet? So I asked you the question. So Trump ordered the change in policy? I think so. I think that's a reasonable interpretation. So what you think happened is around 3 or 4 o'clock, when Miller, I think he said at 3 o'clock. At 4:17. 4:17. So you think at 4:17, Donald Trump called Miller and called, even though no one's testified to this, that he called them and said, hey, you know how I ordered the National Guard to only protect Trump supporters? Now I'm ordering you to deploy them, but this time to protect Congress from Trump supporters. You think that call happened? Nope. Okay. I don't think that call happened. Then you're wrong. Do you remember during the entire Trump administration, people saying that Trump governed by tweet? Like, he would fire people by tweet, he would change policy by tweet, he would announce policy by tweet without coordinating with any of the underlying agencies? Sure, I remember people said things like that, of course. And do you think that's a reasonable interpretation? No, I don't think it's a reasonable interpretation, because this is where you're going with this. So, we had all these people in the chain of command that were worried that Mike Pence was about to be murdered. But they couldn't deploy the National Guard because they mistakenly thought they were under orders from Donald Trump not to deploy the National Guard. Only exception would be to protect Trump supporters. So they sat there and said, well, we're about to witness Congress, even though we have the legal authority to deploy the Guard, we're going to have to watch Mike Pence die. We're going to have to watch the country be overthrown because Donald Trump said that we could only deploy the Guard to help our people. But then he tweeted out, go home, and then they took that as, aha, now that's our order that we could deploy the National Guard. I think that's one of the dumbest. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. To be honest, it really is. That's how the timeline works. No, the timeline. So your extrapolation is because you literally think. Can you show me one person that testified under oath that once they saw Trump tweet that out, that they said, "Oh, Trump's changed what our policy is allowed to be"? Can you show me one person that testified to this? No, nobody ever said that under oath. Why didn't they? Why didn't they? What would be their excuse to withhold the truth? They were never asked. They were asked why they made the decisions they made. Why would they withhold the truth? So your argument is it would be somehow erroneous of me to say, look, we can't really trust their testimony because I think that it belies them saying we didn't do it for optics reasons, belies any common sense whatsoever. It's beyond the pale. You say we shouldn't do that. That's stupid. Okay. But let me finish. But you also don't believe their testimony.
You also think they lied. But you think they lied because their real motivation was they were literally about to watch the government be overthrown. And not just people appointed by Trump. This is people at the CIA. This is people that don't like Trump. But they were going to sit back and watch Mike Pence be murdered and watch senators be murdered and watch the government be overthrown because they were like, well, even though Trump never directly told us you can't deploy the National Guard except to protect my people, that's what we assume he meant. So therefore, we can't deploy them.
No.
But then they saw a tweet and said, okay, this is our code that we're allowed to change that policy, but we will lie about it when we testify for no perceivable reason whatsoever.
On January 6th, there were 3 people that had the authority to actually deploy the National Guard. Mm-hmm. Who are those 3 people?
You had Miller, you had Trump, and was it Walker?
McCarthy.
Okay.
Walker was the DC. He was the DC National Guard commanding general.
Okay.
And what happened is at 3 p.m., and this is what Miller testified to under oath, and he never explained why there was a delay. And here, he says at 3 p.m. he authorized to, quote, activate the National Guard and deploy them to assist the Metro Police. Now, this is where it gets a little weird because DC's got like 7 different bodies, but he did not deploy them for the DC Police. And then they had to get together Miller and McCarthy had to get together to coordinate a plan for how they were going to deploy this. And that plan didn't get approved until 7 minutes after Trump tweeted, "Go home."
Right? I think people call me and Alex Jones conspiracy theorists. I think you are the worst conspiracy theory I've ever heard. This is one of the dumbest. This is definitely one of the dumbest conspiracy theories I've ever heard. I don't know what to say.
But the thing is, we have Miller on. Miller did.
It doesn't matter. Wait, let me ask you this: do you acknowledge that there were people aside from Miller in the chain of command that told Stephen Sund that they couldn't, for optics reasons, deploy the Guard?
As for the specific reasoning on the day, I think there was definitely some concerns about optics. I'm talking mostly about like what happened.
Do you acknowledge that there were people on the phone call that day that told him they couldn't deploy because of optics?
They did say that.
Okay, so then I don't understand why you just obfuscated with the previous answer there when you're acknowledging that occurred. And there were several people in that chain of command, not just Miller, that were saying that they couldn't deploy or they were waiting for direct orders or something. You acknowledge that as well, correct?
No, so Miller. So
I think so I just want to be clear. You're saying that there were several people that Sund did talk to. He only talked to who? Miller?
Well, there was like a big call, and you touched on this a little bit. You brought up the Politico article that talked about, I think it was Williams, that talked a lot about the time discrepancy between like what McCarthy and Miller and Piet and Flynn, what they were all saying was going on, and there were some discrepancies there. But the thing is that we do have on record, Miller did testify that the order, he said this, quote, was the president's response to you with regard to the request made by Mayor Bowser? Or what was the president's response to you with regard to the request made by Mayor Bowser? And this is from a congressional testimony in May of 2021. I can get you the exact thing if you need it. And Miller's response was, fill it and do whatever was necessary to protect the demonstrators and that were executing their constitutionally protected rights. Now, once the riot started happening and everything happened, right? I think it's reasonable to say that Miller didn't necessarily think that it was his place to go and say, okay, these people are no longer exercising their constitutionally protected rights. I need to go and stop them. Especially when Trump was out tweeting Remain and, this is what happens and all this other stuff, right?
I think that this is one of the absolute dumbest things I've ever heard. I say that with all sincerity. I literally, right, I understand what you're saying. Trump on the 3rd was like, yes, or this was on the 6th, said, yes, get the National Guard out there. I want people's constitutionally protected rights to protest. And you think that Miller saw that as no, don't send the National Guard, because if the National Guard was deployed, they would have to go after people that are rioting. And therefore, what Trump's really saying is only send the National Guard if it's to help my people, not to hurt them. That's your argument.
And that's also what Meadows said.
That's not what Meadows said. Show me where Meadows said
Nope.
That. Go ahead. Show me the testimony where Meadows said. I just want to be clear. This is what you're about to show me. The people that had the authority to deploy the National Guard were afraid to do so because they felt that they were only allowed to deploy the Guard to help Trump people and not to prevent members of Congress from being attacked by people. Go ahead. Show me the email where Meadows says that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I sent you a message on Discord.
Okay.
Meadows, in an email to John Akoth, or I don't know who the hell that is, but this is January 5th. They were talking about... Wait a minute.
January 5th. You just said January 6th. We were talking about January 6th.
No, but I'm saying that was I think it's reasonable to say that people assumed this was the standing order, right? If Meadows said that the National Guard was there to protect Trump people, and Miller said that the National Guard was there to protect Trump people, I think it's reasonable to say if they said that on the 3rd and on the 5th of January, and then on the 6th of January, I think it's reasonable for them to assume that they're
That is not reasonable. It is one of the most unreasonable things I've ever heard. Again, just so the audience could hear what this gentleman is saying, several people within the chain of command, because Donald Trump requested the National Guard on January 3rd, because it was his sincere belief that people would come and attack his supporters. So he said, sure, I'd like to see the Guard.
Where is that? Where is that?
What, you don't think that... So wait, what part of what I just said are you saying? Where is that?
That Trump wanted the National Guard there to, protect, to not protect Trump supporters, but to,
what?
I don't know, protect Antifa or whatever?
You literally just sent me an email that says, quote, so BLM, Antifa, and burned the city last year. She refused to call it the National Guard. Now she's pre-calling them out against Trump supporter. What the fuck? And he says it's so they could protect pro-Trump people. We have many more on standby. What Trump was saying, on the 3rd. So you're saying what that meant was to protect Trump people from the police?
I think it was to protect Trump people.
Right. It was to protect Trump people. And what Trump was saying on the 3rd, what he was telling people was he thought that there were going to be groups that came that were anti-Trump. And he wanted them, that's why he said to protect their reason to protected speech. Because he saw rally after rally where you saw left-wing groups came up and it started clashes, which then shut down the rally. He said, I want security there to protect the people that will be peacefully protesting, their right to their First Amendment. Your argument, let me frame so the audience can understand what you're saying. You're saying that a chain of command of several people, including Miller on down,
3 including Trump.
No, not 3 including Trump. We're going to get to the list because, again, what you're
McCarthy.
doing is no. So what you're doing, you're talking about the
McCarthy,
people. I'll just mute you if you're going to continue to talk of me. There were 3 that had ultimate authority to deploy, though there were people that were given the authority to go ahead and do so elsewhere, as I'll get to actual report and testimony that we saw. But there were certainly people that you're admitting that were also in that chain of command that would have also had to go along with this. Right? And you're saying that you're factually... Okay, I'm going to ask you one time, and then I'm going to look it up, and if you're banned from the channel forever if it turns out you're wrong, okay? Now, here's the question I'm going to ask you. You are telling me that Stephen Sund is lying when he says that he talked to people who weren't Miller or weren't McCarthy that told them that for optics reasons and for chain of command reasons and things like that, that they were having trouble making the deploying of the National Guard. That's your testimony right now. That's what you're going to tell me, a yes or no.
They can say that, but there were 3 people that were responsible.
So I asked for a yes or no. Did they say that or not?
They can say that all they want.
Last chance and you're banned from the channel for good. I'll ask you one last time. Did they say that or not?
They did say that.
Okay, now, what that would mean you can say, but those individuals didn't have the ability to deploy. But they would have had to have been in on the scheme. So now we have a litany of people that are sitting there thinking, geez, we're afraid that these Congress people are about to be killed. But because Trump said that he wanted the National Guard to protect his people's right to protest on the 3rd, we assume that means that it would be unlawful for us to deploy the National Guard to protect Congress people that are about to be murdered. But they changed their mind when they saw a tweet from Trump that didn't say, okay, it's now okay to deploy the National Guard. They took that as a dog whistle that, okay, now we understand that Trump means we can deploy the National Guard. Okay, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Well, hey, wait. I'm just trying to process what you're saying. Okay. Oh, you kicked me?
No, I didn't kick you yet. If it's just going to be dead air, I thought you left.
No, sorry. I was processing what you were saying because you said a lot. All I'm saying is that on the day, the explicit authority to deploy the National Guard was McCarthy, the Army Secretary, and there were other people that were under McCarthy, and those were people that were talking about like the optics and stuff, the sun.
What about Rosen? Did he have the authority to deploy?
Rosen? No, he didn't have the authority to deploy.
We'll see.
It was McCarthy, and I already sent you that. If you want to pull up the last message I sent you last week. That's the Army Secretary, Ryan McCarthy, and he's saying nobody can change the mission except for me. And what happened is at 3 o'clock, they pulled the DC National Guard back, and they said we are going to remission you. But they were not given a new remission from 3:04 to 4. Let me look up the exact time. 4:32 was when the quote unquote plan was approved, and that there was a delay between 3 o'clock and 4:32. And while they said, yeah, you can activate and you can pull it back, and this was McCarthy and Miller saying this, McCarthy and Miller were going back and forth about, quote unquote, a plan for how to deploy the National Guard to the Capitol. And what's his name? Walker, who is the commanding general of the DC National Guard. He was like begging them, like, look, just let me go. And they said, no, you got to wait. And you've got to, we have to get a plan together. And then when they were finally given the go ahead at 4:32, no plan was given. They said they had to wait from 3:04 to 4:32 because they had to get a plan together. Okay. And no plan was given until after, well, no plan was given ever, but they weren't given a permission to redeploy to the Capitol until after Trump released the tweet saying, go home.
It's one of the most batshit insane conspiracy theories I've ever heard. Not one person that was aware of this. So how many people would have been aware that were connected, that didn't have the ultimate authority, but would have been aware that the reason that the National Guard...
Miller and McCarthy.
So that's it. So none of the other people... Walker wouldn't have known that. None of the other people that sat in on that briefing, they wouldn't have known. Yeah, you're full of shit. So, hey, thanks so much for calling in. It's one of the most bullshit... It's one of the most bullshit conspiracy theories I've ever heard. It really is. I don't know what to say. This is classic TDS behavior. Oh no, it was dog whistles from Trump. Here's what it was. It was a dog whistle. They interpreted him saying, yeah, sure, I want the National Guard because I think my people will be attacked. I want to protect my people. That was him really saying, under no circumstance can the National Guard ever be deployed unless it's to benefit my people. So that day they were worried that people were about to be murdered. And even though they had the legal authority to deploy, they said, I have to stick by my boss. I have to watch these people overthrow the government and murder members of Congress. I have to, because I think even though Trump didn't directly tell us anything, we think that he dog whistled to us that we can't deploy the Guard except but for to help his people. Then when he puts a tweet out at 4, and they say, once more, Trump never changed his dog whistle message to us. And last time he talked to us directly. But this time we know that he's dog whistling to us from Twitter. And now his dog whistle from Twitter is that we could now deploy the Guard. Now, they see that there's a January 6th committee months later, and that Trump's looking at jail time, and all these people are looking at jail time. But they intentionally all decide to lie under oath. They blatantly lie under oath, and they lie to a partisan Democrat committee that they know is desperate to get Trump. And this committee, clearly, if you're able to figure out this big dog whistling mystery, clearly they would be able to figure it out, right? So they're sitting here and they know that McCarthy's lying, or they know that Miller's lying. They know he's lying. But for no reason whatsoever, this man that was complacent in an insurrection, who literally was going to watch Mike Pence get murdered, they're like, that's okay, we'll let him off the hook. We'll charge everyone else, even non-violent people. But this dude that we know's lying about the dog whistle to end the dog whistle, we're just going to let him off the hook. That's your argument.
I think they were following their commander-in-chief.
Who? The January 6th committee?
No.
Then why did they let them...
McCarthy.
Why did they let them off the hook?
Because they didn't want to throw Trump under the bus.
Why did the January 6th committee let Miller off the hook? They certainly
didn't
wanted
ask him those questions.
Why didn't they? You figured it out, so you're smarter than them? They were unable to figure this out?
I don't know. Maybe.
That's your argument.
Some of them, like some of the questioning did get really like. If you look at Miller getting asked about the difference between the 304 activation and the 432 deployment and the approval of the plan, like Miller doesn't know how to respond to that. It's actually like very weird. It's weird, isn't it?
Oh, so you're going to copy Destiny's line here. Now, I notice you have a different theory than Destiny, right? So Destiny's full of shit too, right?
No.
Wait, but yeah, Destiny said it was for optics, but you're saying that's not it at all. This was an intentional act to facilitate an insurrection.
I'm saying this is another plausible...
No. What do you mean another plausible? It's either the truth or it's not.
It could have been...
You seem very confident. You seem very confident. No, you said those people talking about optics are full of shit. It had nothing to do with optics. It's because they were protecting their commander-in-chief. They were you said that they were intentionally going to allow the murder of these people because they were protecting their commander-in-chief. They didn't want to throw him under the bus. The reason they didn't act, it had nothing to do with optics. It had to do because they felt their hands were tied because Trump wanted these people to be murdered. And he said that only the Guard was only allowed to help his people. It would never be allowed to...
Okay, let's take a step back. Let's calm down. Do you think Trump
tell me to calm down? Fuck off. Get a brain. How about that? Stop being a fucking bullshitter.
No, look.
No, I know the answer will be no.
Do you think Trump wanted the people at the Capitol?
Do I think he wanted people to show up for rallies? Sure.
Do you think he wanted people when they started getting into the Capitol? Do you think he wanted them to leave?
No, I don't. He certainly didn't want violence.
He didn't want violence, but there was violence happening. You could see it. Everyone could see it on TV.
Yeah, well, he didn't want the violence to happen, so.
So why did he let it continue?
What do you mean, did he let it continue? He delegated to people that had the authority to deploy the Guard. Have you ever seen a president in history that made...
He delegated the people to deploy the National Guard to protect
Have you ever seen a president in history get to the on-the-ground tactical decisions of who exactly should be deployed to cause security for a certain building or people? Or can you give me other examples of when that's occurred?
Well, he did.
When?
On January 3rd.
Right,
he
suggested they be there. They said no. He said, okay, fine. That's it. But you expected him on that day to pick up the phone and say, why isn't the Guard being deployed? Well, Mr. Trump, we think because of optics, or we think because you dog whistles. Bullshit! I'm going over you people talking about optics. I'm going to say you need to deploy them now. That's what you expected him to do?
He should have called. I mean, what ended up ending the riot? His tweet.
Not necessarily.
Oh,
well, why didn't his tweet at 2:28 that said "Be peaceful, respect police"? Why didn't that end it?
Because he was been working him up for like.
Oh, so that tweet didn't count. That one doesn't count. The people said, "Nah, we're not going to listen to that tweet."
This was after the violence was already started, and he didn't tell them to go home. He said, "Stay there," and he said, be peaceful, sure, but like." They weren't being peaceful.
Quote from May 12th, 2021, hearing of oversight and reform in the House. Question. I want to ask Mr. Miller, and just to clarify a few points, as well as Mr. Rosen, so please stand by, Mr. Miller. I believe you testified that you had all the authority you needed without talking to President Trump on January 6th. Is that accurate? Miller, yes.
Yep.
Mr. Biggs says, and Mr. Rosen, you also said you did not need to talk to the President on January 6th because you had all the authority that you needed to act. Is that correct? Mr. Rosen, yes.
Yep. And what was the mission that he was authorized to deploy?
They were the mission that they were authorized to deploy. Here's another. The D.C. National Guard required to enforce the MPD and USCP positions. Now, that is not an authorization to deploy to the Capitol, correct, Mr. Miller? I gave full authorization to deploy, ma'am. You gave full authorization to deploy at 3 p.m., Miller. Yes, that's correct. Ocasio-Cortez, okay. No, I'm sorry, it went out at 3:04. So wait a minute. Why did Miller give the full authorization at 3:04 if he was under the impression that that was against the wishes of his president until his president tweeted out at 4:14?
Because the authorization was for an activation and to wait for a remissioning.
He
But the
gave
remissioning didn't come until 4:34.
No.
Keep reading that.
No.
Keep reading that interview.
No. So the remission.
Keep reading the testimony. It's like the next line.
Well, I only got a snippet of a screenshot that someone sent.
Okay. Do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah, send me it. Yeah. Show me the page that it's on.
I think this is it.
But I'm going to let you go. I'll read this. I will. I'll read it on here.
Okay.
But I'm going to let you go because I really don't have the time of day to waste my precious time talking to someone that's one of the biggest bullshit conspiracy theories I've ever heard. So you can go to Alex Jones' channel and you can talk about these bullshit conspiracy theories of dog whistles to stand and dog whistles and that all of these people are lying and things like that. But thanks so much for wasting my time and being one of the dumbest people I've seen on the channel. Always appreciate it.
Real quick. Real quick. I think I might be muted on YouTube. Can you look into that? I don't know if one of your mods or whatever muted me. I don't know what it was for.
I don't give a shit. I wouldn't mute you. I really wouldn't. But I don't give a shit to even look into it.
I don't.
Go fuck yourself. Enjoy yourself. See ya. Yep. Take it easy. How'd the call go? I guess fine. Discord. Thanks. What a bullshitter. But I do hope he sends me that. We'll look into it. So there you have it. The people that call you conspiracy theorists tell you actually the real conspiracy theory. Let's go through the timeline, shall we, on actual January 6th. Oh shit, I thought I just had that up. Let me go to the restroom first. It would be terrible if I urinated my pants here, so I'll be right back. Oh, I don't need the headset now. So, all right, we'll go through this document. So I believe this is the official timeline that's been put together by, I believe, the committee, January 6th committee. Or it's the Capitol Police's timeline of events. Ready? So we'll go through this. It's like 14 pages. The document memorializes the critical events leading up to January 6th attack at the Capitol. The timelines as follows. December 16th, the United States Capitol Police learns that different groups of protesters and organizers coming to U.S. Capitol grounds related to the January 6, 2021 joint sessions. Special event assessments issued for demonstrations. Initial assessment indicates two groups of demonstrators, a group called Donald You're Fired, an anti-Trump group, and a group called Patriots United March, a pro-Trump group. Initial assessments find no information regarding specific disruptions or acts of civil. So already right out of the gate, they're like, January 6th, there's going to be a pro-Trump group and an anti-Trump group. Fine, okay. Friday, December 18th, the Capitol Police begins developing a civil disturbance action plan for January 6th. Tuesday, December 22nd, Metropolitan Police hosts a multi-agency teleconference in which agencies share intelligence of the initial planning of January 6th. The following agencies are represented: the Metro Police, the Parks Police, the Transit Authority, the FBI's Washington office, the FBI's headquarters, Supreme Court Police, United States Secret Service, DC Fire and Emergency. December 23rd, revised special event assessments issued for the January 6th demonstration. The revised assessment includes that on December 19th, the POTUS called for supporters to be there. It'll be wild. Revised assessment identifies 4 pro-Trump groups holding protests. It also includes 3 counter-protest groups. It indicates the protest rallies are expected to be similar to the Million MAGA March rallies in November and December, which drew tens of thousands of participants. It's also expected that members of the Proud Boys, Antifa, and other extremist groups will be there. So, remember, one of the things Destiny said was, well, FBI and all these groups only thought it was like a dozen of people. They didn't think that those people would be miles away. But the official assessment that they're talking about was they're assuming tens of thousands of people will be there. Revised assessment finds no information regarding specific disruption or acts of civil disobedience targeting this function. Due to the tense political environment following the election, the threat of disruptive action or violence can't be ruled out. The initial draft of the Capitol Police operational plan issues the Assistant Chief Chad Thomas United Operations and is approved. The initial CDU plan proposes perimeter fencing, proposes the deployment of 4 platoons, SWAT teams, blah, blah, blah. December 28th. Chief of Police Stephen Sun participates in a Metropolitan Police Department hosted bi-weekly law enforcement partners meeting in which intelligence and planning for January 6th are discussed. The partners participating include the Metropolitan Police, United States Police, Amtrak Department, Federal Air Marshals. Capitol Police personnel, this is December 29th, attend a multi-agency teleconference hosted by the Metropolitan Police, which agents are briefed on intelligence and planning for January 6th. Joint Session Perimeter Plan issues Assistant Chief Thomas and is approved. December 30th. Revised assessment indicates a number of individuals or groups are calling for their supporters to travel to D.C. on or before January 6th to show support for protests for overturning the election results. These protest rallies are expected to be similar to the Million MAGA March. Revised assessment indicates Stop the Steal has posted a webpage entitled wildprotest.com that includes a map of the Capitol grounds indicating they will be gathering on the Senate East Front Gray on January 6, 2021. The webpage states, "We the people must take the Capitol lawn in steps. They plan to show support for members of Congress who are expected to file objections to certify the electoral vote." So again, they expected people to actually show up to the Capitol grounds. Revised assessment indicates member of Congress is confirmed as speaker at Stop the Field event. There have been several social media posts encouraging protesters to be armed. Found no information regarding specific disruptions or acts of civil disobedience regarding the function. Deputy Chief Timothy Bowen, Uniformed Service, directs USP Division Commanders to bring all available personnel to joint session and demonstrations. USP cancels ready reserve assignments. December 31st. Capitol Police Intelligence and Interagency Coordination holds an internal briefing review on December 30th, special assessment with officials at the rank of captain and above. January 2nd. Carl Corbin of the DoD texts USP Chief Son Gallagher, Protective Service Bureau, to determine whether the Capitol Police is issuing a request for National Guard for January 6th. January 3rd. Capitol City Police Deputy Chief Gallagher replies to the DoD text via text. The request for the National Guard support is not forthcoming at this time after consultation with Sund. Revised special assessment for January 6 issues the Capitol Police executive team and deputies to both the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms and the House Sergeant-at-Arms. That's under Pelosi and under McConnell. Revised assessment indicates 6 members of Congress expected to speak, indicates some militia members who will be participating in this event in Virginia plan to stay in D.C. and on the 5th while armed. Revised assessment indicates there's also indication white supremacist group might be coming. The assessment states, quote, "Due to the tense political environment following the 2020 election, the threat of disruptive actions or violence cannot be ruled out. Supporters of the current president see January 6th as the last opportunity to overturn the results of the election. The sense of desperation and disappointment may lead to an incentive to become violent. Unlike previous post-election protests, the targets of the pro-Trump supporter are not necessarily the counter-protesters as they were previously, but rather Congress itself is the target on the 6th. As outlined above, there's been a worrisome call for protesters in these events to be armed and the possibilities they'll be inclined to become violent. Further, unlike the events of November 14, 2020 and December 12, 2020, there are several more protests scheduled on January 6th. The majority of them will be on Capitol grounds. The 2 protests expected to be the largest of the day, the Women for America First at the Ellipse and the Stop the Steal around 9, may draw thousands of participants have both been promoted by Trump himself. The Stop the Steal protest in particular does not have a permit, but high-profile speakers, including members of Congress, are expected to speak at the event. That, combined with the Stop the Steal's propensity to attract white supremacist militia members and others who actively promote violence, may lead to a dangerous situation." So again, Destiny's saying, oh, the FBI and these organizations, they just thought it would be a handful of people. That's not what the intelligence is saying beforehand. The Capitol Police increases the size of the dignitary protection details from agents from 4 agents to 6 agents during the week of January 3rd. It extends coverage for dignitary protections. It posts dignitary agents and the congressional leaders. Mandates that each protection have an MP7 or M4 assault weapon. It's 24/7. It embeds an analyst from the National Capital Region Threat Intelligence Consortium during the week of January 3rd. Monday, January 4th. Capitol Police holds an internal briefing review on January 3rd special assessment with officials of the rank of captain and above. The issue of January 3rd special event to all Capitol officials at the rank of sergeant or above. The personnel attend a multi-agency conference held by the Metropolitan Police to brief. Captain Son attends the January 6th event with law enforcement partners in Metropolitan Police, National Guard, Architect of the Capitol, the FBI, the Metro Amtrak Military District. Quote, Sun asked the Sergeant-at-Arms, Michael Stenger, and the House Sergeant-at-Arms, Paul Irving, for authority to have the National Guard assist with the security for the January 6, 2020 event based on the briefing with law enforcement partners and revised intelligence. His request is denied. Now, the conspiracy theorist that just called in told you that on the 3rd, that Trump was saying, I want the National Guard, but only protect my people. Now, there is zero evidence that the House and the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms are also in the bag for Trump. So Sund is asking them specifically for permission to go out and get the National Guard. Even if they don't have the authority themselves, I do believe that they are a crucial step, and they may have the authority themselves, I'm not sure, on that day, on the 4th, to deploy it. Yet they deny his request. Instead, they tell Sun to, quote, contact General Walker at the D.C. National Guard to discuss the Guard's ability to support request if needed. Sun notifies General Walker of the D.C. National Guard, indicating that the Capitol Police may need D.C. National Guard support for January 6th, but does not have authority to request at this time. Walker advises Sun that in the event of an authorized request, the National Guard could quickly repurpose 125 troops to provide D.C. with COVID-related assistance. Troops would need to be sworn in. Revised Joint Session Perimeter Plan issued based on request for the House Sergeant-at-Arms and Senate Sergeant-at-Arms to change existing perimeter. Senate Sergeant-at-Arms notifies the Capitol Police that the Senate side of the Capitol is to be restricted to senators and staff. Capitol Police issues a USB operational posture for joint sessions of Congress, January 6, which provides the following activities beyond routine in session. Pre-Skeeter, increased controls, blah, blah, blah. Officers posted. Capitol Police personnel investigate a threat to fly a plane in the U.S. Capitol to avenge the death of Soleimani. January 5th. Capitol Police issue new helmets and soft platoons. They begin issuing demonstration updates with information about activity related to January 6th. Sun holds joint task force to discuss January 6th inaugural events with police chiefs of the Capitol, House Sergeant-at-Arms, Secretary Sergeant-at-Arms, U.S. Secret Service, FBI, and D.C. National Guard. So again, on the 5th, the FBI is talking to Sun and not saying, oh, by the way, we have credible evidence from confidential sources that they're about to attack and try to overthrow the government. On the 5th, he's meeting with the FBI, and they're still not telling him that. Captain Sund, Assistant Chief Uganda Pittman, Protective Intelligence Operation, Assistant Chief Thomas tore the outer perimeter. Final Joint Session Perimeter Plan revised based on the Senate and House Sergeant-at-Arms to restrict access to the Capitol using bike rack and other personnel. Pittman coordinates movement of physical barriers with Secret Service Bureau and Architect of the Capitol to conform to the new plan. Sun informs the Sergeant-at-Arms in separate discussions about the D.C. National Guard ability to provide troops if necessary. Final plan. So they give a plan. It indicates that in the event the protest group exceeds the capability to obtain compliance, motor and scouts will create a box around the mobile group. Approximately 1,900 to 2,000 hours. The task force embedded with the FBI emails intelligence section and memorandum from the FBI Norfolk office providing additional details regarding the January 6th event. Still didn't tell them about their specific intelligence of an impending insurrection. On the day of January 6th. Here we go. So again, you see from that how many times the FBI was in contact with Sund and with the Capital City Police and other interagency intelligence, and they gave no specific information that they knew. They're being briefed. Oh, there could be white supremacists. There could be violence. It could get out of control. There could be anti-Trump groups. We're requesting additional security. The FBI is sitting there listening to this, and for some reason never goes, oh yeah, we forgot to tell you, by the way, for months we've been embedded with these groups, and they have a super specific plan to carry out an insurrection. It just slipped their mind. And the FBI is sitting there listening to the guy that's in charge with defense saying, can we get the National Guard? And the Sergeant-at-Arms are like, no. And they don't speak up and say, but wait a minute, there's going to be an insurrection. They just keep that information private for some reason. Strange. I guess they were involved in the big conspiracy too on bass guitar. Anyways, on the day of January 6th at 600 hours, Capitol Police deployed counter-surveillance agents to monitor and report back demonstrations at the Ellipse, metro stations around the Capitol Supreme Court, including their tire packages, etc. They deployed DPD agents at the Ellipse. They have agents on emergency evacuation. 7:43. Capitol Police begin releasing demonstration updates. 8:23. The department receives intelligence regarding radio frequency that some of the demonstrators are using to communicate. The department intercepts a frequency and assigns intelligence analysts monitor. 8:45. 75 to 100 demonstrators walk up to Constitution Avenue. 9:26, approximately 50-60 people in the house egg. 10 o'clock, Metro Transit personnel investigate suspicious package. Capitol Police respond. 10:02, suspicious package at Capitol South Metro is cleared. 10:22, Capitol Police demonstrate update indicates unconfirmed count of crowd size at 25 to 30,000 at the Ellipse. Update also indicates the organizers of the Ellipse event planning to march to the Capitol after the POTUS speech. 10:48, Capitol Police demonstration update indicates a large crowd of protesters gathered on the East Front remain peaceful. 10:51, one group originally permitted for the Senate East Front Grassy Area 9 will no longer be demonstrating. 10:58, demonstration group gathers at Senate Park on the C Street side of the Russell State Office building. Also steady flow of demonstrators walking around Louisiana and Constitution heading west. 10:58, USSP learns that another agency has recovered 2 firearms from an unintended vehicle in the Northwest DC and reports it over the radio. 10:59, approximately 200 Proud Boys gathered near Garfield Circle moved towards Senate Egg. 11:09, approximately 400 demonstrators on the East Front stretching from Senate Plaza to House Plaza. 11:11, Capitol Police demonstration update indicates that the Metropolitan Police found a vehicle with a rifle and a scope in plain view of L'Enfant Plaza. 11:14, Capitol Police investigate suspicious package. 11:15, Gem sends alert. The USSP is conducting an investigative suspicious package. Till further notice, 11:24, Capitol Police monitors 3 to 4 counter demonstrators setting up props on 3rd Street in Pennsylvania Southeast. 11:26, Capitol Police investigated Twitter posting indicate that a militia was being formed at Capitol Hill by the Silver Arm Band. Allegedly, a man was handed a flyer near the U.S. Capitol that states the national militia is being organized at Capitol Hill to defend the Constitution of the Republic, and members must wear silver armbands to identify their lawful combatants. 11:35, additional demonstrators arrive at Capitol Square. 11:39, Gems alert said the Capitol Police is continuing to investigate a suspicious package. It's roped off till further notice. 11:44, approximately 100-150 demonstrators waking up to Delaware Avenue from Union Station. 11:51, Capitol Police demonstration indicates the Metropolitan Police Department's responding to reports of a man with a rifle at 15 in Constitution. 11:51 also, Capitol Police demonstration update indicates DHS is investigating 2 handguns found in a vehicle. Approximately 11:57, Trump begins his speech. 12:04, Capitol Police clears suspicious package. 12:15, Gems alert, Capitol Police has cleared the suspicious package. 12:29, Capitol Police personnel reports hearing the sound of a taser at Senate Egg. USP Capitol Police advised for situational awareness and officer safety. Where are we at? 12:30, very large group reported heading to the Capitol eastbound from Pennsylvania Avenue. That's before Trump's speech is over. 12:33, Capitol Police demonstration update indicate USPP have detained a person armed with a rifle. Approximately 12:36, Capitol Police and the USS escort the Vice President into the Capitol. Gems alert sent. Due to demonstration activity, the following roads are closed. 12:44, Capitol Police investigate an explosive device near the RNC headquarters. 12:45, DC camera captures what looks like a wall of people suddenly arriving at the block west of the Capitol. 12:46, Capitol Police shut down Constitution Avenue because of protesters. 12:48, Gems alert, Capitol Police responding to suspicious package. 12:49, Capitol Police K9 units sweep command center and conduct additional sweeps. 12:52, Capitol Police deploy additional personnel clearing residents near RNC headquarters. Approximately 12:53, insurrectionists at the front of the large group amassing at the Capitol reflecting will pick up a metal barrier and push it into USCP officers. A crowd begins to press onto the restricted capitals. I also believe this is before Trump's speech is done. 12:55, Capitol Police direct all Capitol Police units to respond to the west front of the Capitol to assist with the breaches. The Capitol Police instructed the lower west terrace and the south side. 12:56, the police direct to respond to the upper terrace to contain insurrectionists. 12:56, personnel Capitol Police evacuate construction workers. 12:58, Sund asked and received assistance from acting chief county of the Metropolitan Police. 1 o'clock. Capitol Police personnel advised Metro to have train bypass Capitol South Metro Station due to explosive device. 1 o'clock. CDU hard platoon forms line in Upper West Terrace and less lethal grenadiers are prepped to launch. 13:01. Sund asks and receives assistance from Chief Thomas Sullivan of the Secret Service. 101. Capitol Police evacuates Madison Building due to explosive device. 103. Capitol Police personnel finds explosive chemicals, even Molotov cocktails, and a firearm. 104. Sund asks the Senate Secretary of Arms for a declaration of emergency National Guard support. 104. He reaches out, who? To the Senate Sergeant at Arms and asks for the National Guard and is denied. Now, according to the conspiracy theorists that just called in, That's because also this Senate Sergeant at Arms, who has no love for Donald Trump, for some reason he is protecting Donald Trump and willing to watch Congress people be murdered. That's his argument. That's the argument. Why would he deny this request? 105. Prisoner transport staged to Houseide Plaza. 106. Capitol Police Grenadiers directed to launch chemical munitions. 106. Capitol Police go door to door to notify residents of explosive device to activate. 107. Capitol Police investigate device at DNC. 108. Capitol Police deploy OC spray. 109. Sun asked the House Sergeant of Arms for a declaration of emergency National Guard support. This is the one under Nancy Pelosi. Why? So again, Bass Guitar, who just called in, he said, no, these calls weren't really going out. They weren't. So now both the House Sergeant of Arms, who's under Nancy Pelosi, he's covering for Donald Trump because he believes that no. When Sun requested the National Guard on the 4th, he said no. And now he's saying no because Donald Trump led them to believe you could only deploy the Guard to protect Trump supporters. That's what the conspiracy theorists that just called in would have you believe. Pretty quiet now, isn't he? Thought so. That's why I was so frustrated with the call, because I'd read this earlier today and knew he's full of shit. That's why I'm asking him, were there other people involved in the calls? And he'll say, well, maybe these people didn't have the right to deploy the Guard themselves. But why is Sun calling them then? He clearly thinks they're an important step to getting the National Guard deployed, and they have to be involved in this conspiracy as well. So again, for all those people from when I'm debating Destiny or anyone else, so I'm done talking. Is everyone clear? Just so we can move on for this, let me go back to this real quick. Can I dispense with getting distracted dealing with this absurd conspiracy theorist? That it was a dog whistle, that when Trump said, I want the National Guard, he was really telling them, under no circumstance can you deploy the National Guard to protect Congress people from my supporters. Is everyone fine if I move on from that and then talk about what anyone else is saying? Everyone cool? So we can move on from him. All right. (109) Capitol Police personnel closes the roadways due to explosives. 109. GEM set up alert. They're continuing to investigate suspicious package. 110. POTUS speech ends. So all of this shit is before Trump's speech ends. You wouldn't believe that, though, to hear people that said that Trump inspired them all to go do this. They were literally doing it as Trump was speaking. By the way, saying things like, go peacefully. Also at 110, Metropolitan Police respond to Southside Upper West Terrace. 111, Capitol Police personnel evacuates the Cannon Building. 114, they raise all South barricades. And the Secret Service evacuate protectee at DNC. 115, following PA House announcer message sent, evacuate the Cannon Building. 121, additional Metropolitan Police come to U.S. Capitol. 122, Capitol Police following the building due to activity in Cannon. 122, Sun reiterates request to House Sergeant at Arms for emergency declaration for National Guard support. So 20 minutes later, he talks to them again. Please give me the emergency declaration so I could request the Guard. They won't do it. Must be involved in the conspiracy. 123, Capitol Police personnel arrest 2 insurrectionists for unlawful conduct. 125, Capitol Police personnel arrest insurrectionists for unlawful conduct. 130, Capitol Police advise DNC to have occupants shelter in place. 134, CDU units respond to Lower Terrace. 135, Capitol Police relocate DPD leadership limos from Senate to the House side of Capitol Plaza. 139, GEMS alert sent Cannon Building evacuate and relocation. 140, Sun requests and receives confirmation of support from Ashen Benedict at the ATF. So the ATF's sending support, the Secret Service is sending support, but he keeps asking the Sergeant at Arms, can I declare for the National Guard? They won't allow him. By the way, these operate under the authority of Mitch McConnell and of Nancy Pelosi. And so far, for over 30 minutes, he's been asking for support to declare an emergency to get the National Guard. They refuse to give it to him. And I suppose... Never mind, we're moving on from the conspiracy theorists. 142, insurrectionist breach Lower West Terrace and scaffolding. 145, insurrectionist breach East Plaza. 148, Gems alert sent, all clear. The Cannon building's been cleared. 148, insurrectionist breach Upper West Terrace. 149, Sun requests National Guard support from General Walker. Advised Walker that finally an emergency declaration is forthcoming. $151. Sun calls Metropolitan Washington Consortium of Governments to activate LE mutual aid with National Capital Region. 153. Capitol Police Library Division deploys 12 officers. 154. Insurrectionist brief inauguration stage. 157. Metropolitan Police hard platoons respond to Lower West Terrace door. 159. Insurrectionist breach of barrier to north side of the plaza. 159. CDU form on Senate steps. 2 o'clock. Pittman orders lockdown of the Capitol. 202, Gems alert sent due to police activity. All personnel are advised to relocate from Cannon building. 203, Sun reiterates to the House Sergeant at Arms request for emergency declaration of National Guard support. Again, the House Sergeant at Arms under Nancy Pelosi, he needs to get support for a declaration of emergency to get the National Guard, and he keeps being denied. But wait a minute, I was informed that the Sergeant at Arms had nothing to do with it. 205, following announcer message sent. Due to external security threat, no entries permitted at the Capitol building. 206, insurrectionists breach Rotunda. Capitol Police deployed 10 units with shields. Gems alert sent at 206. Capitol Police is praying to disrupt a suspicious package on Canal Street. 208, insurrectionists breach Houch Plaza from the south. 208, Pittman orders Capitol Complex wide lockdown. 210, verbal emergency declaration and gives authority for National Guard deployment. CPB. What would CPB be? Capitol Police. Let me see here. I'm not showing you any of this. Well, shit. That sucks. Where do you find this? Well, shit. It would be nice to know what CPB means. On page 16. Of course. I'll find this, I assure you. Does anyone know what CPB stands for? I'm assuming Customs Border? CPB? Customs Border? I don't think so. Here's why it matters. Oops, sorry. It might be Capitol Police Bureau. But here we go. At 2:10, CPB issues verbal emergency declaration and gives the authority for National Guard deployment. So over an hour after he keeps asking the Sergeant at Arms, can we get authority for a declaration? They waited an hour to give it. They thought that there was going to be attacks on the lives of these people in Congress, but they waited an hour. 2:10, Gems alert. Due to external threat, relocate. 2:10, following PA announcer message. Due to external security, no entries permitted. 2:10, Capitol Police personnel arrest a rider for kicking in a window. 2:11, Capitol Police personnel and Secret Service escort Pence from the Senate chambers. 2:15, Capitol Police units evacuate House and Senate leadership. 2:15, second floor of the Capitol breached. 2:15, Capitol Police units directed to respond to Rotunda. 2:17, the following PA announcer, security threat, security, blah, blah, blah. 2:18, Gems alert Capitol staff due to security threat, move inside. 2:18, Capitol Police barricade Senate chamber. 2:19, approximately 200 insurrectionists breach Rotunda. 2:20, reach Senate South door. 2:22, CDU platoons arrive. 2:42, suspicious package. 2:46, Sund urgently requests National Guard support during teleconference with Christopher Rodriguez, DC Homeland Security, Chief Conti, Metropolitan Police Department, General Walker, DC National Guard, Muriel Bowser, DC Mayor, Lieutenant General Walter I.E. Pyatt, Army Staff Secretary. COP Sund is advised by the Army Staff Secretary, we don't like the optics of the National Guard standing in a line at the Capitol, and it's his recommendation that the Secretary of the Army will not support the request. So, just to be clear, I know I said I was done talking about the conspiracy theorists here, but the following people are involved in this conspiracy theory to intentionally allow Mike Pence to be murdered because they think it's the will of Donald Trump to not allow the Secret Service to be deployed unless it's to help Trump supporters. That's what this guy said. Here's the people involved. Head of DC Homeland Security, Christopher Rodriguez. The Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, Chief Conti. Head of the DC National Guard, General Walker. The DC Mayor, Muriel Bowser. Army Staff Secretary Pyatt. And Pyatt actually says, we don't like the optics. But that was all a lie. What they really meant was, oh, we think Donald Trump said. Get it? Understand? The guy at the Army, Pyatt, said they didn't like the optics. So they thought they're being told they're getting in there. They're going to murder Congress people. We're trying to evacuate Congress people. They're insurrectionists. And they're like, well, we don't like the optics of protecting them. We don't like that. Does anyone see the insanity of this? So we'll get back to it in a minute. 2:28, remaining members evacuated. 2:30, per the DC National Guard's request, Capitol Police drafts a formal written request to the Department of Defense for National Guard support. 2:32, Capitol Police personnel deployed. 34, terrorist breached. 237, court order house breached. 239, Capitol personnel begin evacuating. 240, FBI personnel investigate an explosive device. So the FBI's there, but they're still not communicating. Oh, by the way, we had intelligence there was about to be an insurrection. 243, Capitol Police personnel shoots Ashley Babbitt. 244, Assistant Pittman orders the SWAT team to respond to the House floor. 244, officers barricading third floor of the gallery. 245, Capitol Police inspector meets with evacuated congressional leadership. 250, Senate chamber breached. 250, Capitol Police SWAT team deployed. 251, Capitol City Police SWAT team holds insurrectionists at gunpoint. 251, Capitol Police and LE partnerships distract members and staff. 257, Capitol Police personnel arrest a rioter. 257, evacuation of members on the House floor completed. 257, Capitol Police extract members in offices. 1504, Capitol Police deploy CDU hard platoons to Rotunda. I'm sorry, now we're at 307. Approximately 20 ATF and FBI personnel arrive at Speaker's Lobby. 309, Montgomery County Police Department. So you have all these agencies that are showing up. Still, the National Guard that's 2 blocks away isn't allowed to be involved. 318, Capitol Police personnel extract member from his office. 326, Capitol Police deploy canines for sweep. 332, Capitol Police and LE partners clear Senate floor. 332, hard platoon of 40 Department of Homeland Security officers deployed. 333, explosive device and RNCs cleared. 341, GEMS alert, due to security threat, move inside your nearest office. 343, Capitol Police extract members. 347, Capitol Police clear rotunda. 351, armed squad of Arlington County Police are deployed. Still no National Guard. 354, Capitol Police personnel extract staff. 359, Capitol Police personnel arrest insurrectionist. 401, Capitol Police personnel extract staff. 407, Capitol Police personnel extract staff from office. 408, Fairfax Police Department Virginia State Troopers arrive. GEMS alert at 409. 411, the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms requires Capitol Police extraction team to respond to Senate offices in the Capitol. Notice that the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms wouldn't allow the request for the National Guard. Now at 411, they're requesting senators be evacuated. 413, Capitol Police arrest insurrectionist. 415, Sun has a teleconference with Pence. 415, Capitol Police personnel extract member from the chamber. 419, chambers cleared. GEM sends alert at 421. 428, Capitol Police confirm basement subways floors cleared. Capitol Police personnel extract staff barricade Senate office. 436, suspicious package DNC cleared. 445, personnel deployed munitions where insurrectionists are. 448, Capitol Police and LE partners moved insurrectionists from west front of terrace. And they're arresting people. 536, Capitol Police Chief Sund meets with Pence and teleconference and House Speaker Pelosi to brief them on security posture. Advised that the building could be safely reoccupied by, 1900, so that's 7:30. 538, they push away. Finally, at 547, National Guard buses headed to North Barricade. See if there's anything else worth. Now, all these people, guy from the Army, Metropolitan Police, Mary Bell, all these people, they're in on this conspiracy, according to Bass Guitar. In on the conspiracy. Can someone tell me why the chief from the Army, the House Sergeant-at-Arms under Pelosi, the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms under McConnell, why they weren't giving the go-ahead and the clear recommendations to deploy the National Guard? Can anyone tell me why that's the case? So I again go back to this. They thought that they're all under the impression that there's about to be people storming the Capitol and possibly killing senators and congresspeople. But they're like, we can't interfere because of optics. How does that make any sense? Can anyone tell me how that makes any sense? Anyone? Sun's going through his chain of command, the steps he's supposed to take. He's supposed to get the authority to say, okay, there's an official emergency. He has to go to certain people to get this emergency declaration. Then that could be sent up the chain of command where the official declaration could be responded to with, okay, deploy the National Guard. But all of these people are like, no. That's right, Two-Face. Because if the National Guard if they stop them from breaching, then they don't have their big story, do they, of the insurrection? Now, what Destiny will tell you, when I debated Destiny, what did he tell you? For optics. That's why. Optics. No one, that's what they testified to under oath. So we have to believe it. Go ahead, comments. What would you argue with me about with that? Unless you're not talking to me. By the way, I'm going to have to buy Son's book. When he says Pelosi, he's talking about the House Sergeant at Arms. So for 71 minutes, he's asking the House Sergeant of Arms, give me permission to declare an emergency. I need glasses. It's called optic. Comments, I'll bring you on some other day, man. I'm sorry, but I want to get through this, and then I got to get to bed. This is about an hour interview, but we're going to run it at 1.5 speed. Now remember, I want you, as we watch this, to think you're a good person at the FBI. You have credible intelligence. There's about to be an attack on the United States, and they're possibly going to murder members of Congress and Mike Pence. You're involved in intelligence briefings over and over, leading into January 6th. There's no sound on Twitch, is that true? No sound? Oh boy, wait, what? That's okay, I'll fix it. Thank you. Well, that's odd. Well, I'll be. Let's see if I can fix that, huh? Interesting. Why would that not work? Well, maybe we won't be watching this. I can't figure this out. Why would that be the case? Oh, this happened before. How do I fix this? This is frustrating. Maybe this isn't going to work. We can't figure out why.
With fuck it, I will take
there we go.
Discipline there is.
Once
we got her
out of control for 71 minutes. Pelosi refused to allow you to bring in the National Guard. Why don't we have answers?
It doesn't seem like people really want to get to the bottom.
2021. It was commonly known there was going to be a demonstration, or believed there was going to be a demonstration in front of the Capitol that day. You were the chief of Capitol Police, you're in charge of security at the Capitol. So it would seem logical that you would have the most intelligence, the most up-to-date, most accurate intelligence about what was likely to happen that day, because you're consulting with all kinds of other agencies, intel agencies, law enforcement agencies, lots of federal agencies. But it doesn't sound like you did have the most information about what was going to happen.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, what we've learned that it was out there at the time versus what we had coming into it, night and day. when you talk about the intelligence agency, I have my own intelligence agency up at Capitol Police, IICD, Interagency Intelligence Coordination Division.
Yes.
That coordinates with the other intelligence agencies. And now, we're seeing the intelligence I was getting coming into it was indicating this was going to be just like the previous MAGA rallies, the November and December rallies that we had. We had limited skirmishes. We had some skirmishes afterwards down by BLM Plaza with some of the Antifa groups and some of the BLM groups. But coming into it, absolutely zero with the intelligence that we know now existed, talking about attacking the Capitol, killing my police officers, attacking members of Congress and killing members of Congress. None of that was included in the intelligence coming up.
Get that? So remember when we read that report, right? We went through that and all the briefings that they had, that the FBI attended and all these intel agencies attended? That they're saying in all of these trials of Proud Boys, oh, we knew they were going to attack, they were planning to attack members of Congress. They were planning to attack with lethal weapons police officers. In fact, the Colorado court case says, it said it's so evident that the FBI and other agencies knew this that Trump should have known. Well, here's the guy tasked with security saying, we were never informed. Why wouldn't they be informed?
That you received.
Correct.
But others received that intelligence.
Well, we now know FBI, DHS was swimming in that intelligence. We also know now that the military seem to have some very concerning intelligence as well.
So the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the military all had the intelligence. By the way, groups, not the FBI, but the military and the DHS, both that were involved in calls where he's trying to request the National Guard. So, for example, the guy from the Army that's like, no, optics, we don't want the National Guard there from optics. His agency has intelligence that this is an insurrection. And he's saying, no, we can't deploy the National Guard for optics. How does that make any sense?
It's hard to overstate how strange that is, because you were in charge of the actual facility that was the focus of the protest.
Well, think about it. I'm the chief of police at the United States Capitol, probably one of the most prominent and should be the most secure building in the United States in the world. You'd like to think of that. But when you look at it, and don't take my word for it, there's now at least four congressional reports talking about the intelligence failure, IG reports, GAO reports talking about various intelligence failures. But coming into it, think about it. FBI, the Washington field office didn't put out a single document, a single official document specific to January 6th. DHS didn't put out a single official document specific to January 6th. That's very unusual. I've been through many other events in Washington, D.C. FBI would host a joint conference call at the least, maybe a executive JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force briefing, and for all these big events, DHS and FBI would get together and put out something that was called a JIB, a Joint Intelligence Bulletin. Zero for January 6th.
So you've described this as an intelligence failure, but a failure is something that happens.
So in other words, all the other times, he said he's been through this all the time, where they'll put out a joint intelligence briefing. But they didn't this time. Now, all those other times they point out that briefing, and they didn't have evidence of an impending insurrection. But this time they did. And for some reason they decided, you know what, we're not going to tell anyone. We're not going to tell the people tasked with security. Even though we know they're desperately asking for the National Guard despite it, maybe it would have helped them say, oh yeah, we will allow the National Guard. If the FBI or DHS would have spoke up and said, oh, by the way, there's going to be a violent insurrection that day. But instead they sit there and listened and said, we're just not going to intervene. Why did I use the interview instead of Sun's sworn testimony? Because I have access to the interview and I'm looking at it now? Does it matter? Are you contending that Sun's testimony is contradictory to what he's saying here? We could look through Sun's testimony some other day if you like.
Accidentally. And I don't see how this could be accidental. So walk us through the contact that you had with DHS and FBI in the days before January 6th.
So my contacts with those agencies or the other law enforcement agencies would have always been through my IICD.
Yes.
They were the ones that was the conduit. We're a consumer of intelligence. We had turned to the intelligence community to get the latest intelligence. I know Metropolitan was hosting a conference call every couple of Mondays, and I was on a couple of those conference calls. None of the intelligence that was coming up talking about the storming of the Capitol, killing members of Congress, or killing my police officers was ever discussed in those the conference calls that I was on, at least. And think of this.
And so you never heard that?
Never heard it. And
but how could you not have? I don't work in a federal bureaucracy, but that doesn't seem to make sense at all.
It doesn't make sense. Think about this. On January 5th, the day before the attack, at 1 p.m., I think it's 1 or noon, I had a conference call with the leaders of all the law enforcement, Conti from Metropolitan Police Department, Steve D'Antuono, the director of the Washington Field Office for the FBI. Nobody from DHS was on. I hadn't thought about that, but all the law enforcement that was down there. I had the military district of Washington, General Omar Jones, on the phone with me. I had the head of the National Guard, General William Walker, on the call. It was a call I coordinated. Not one person on that call talked about any concerns for the intelligence, the attack on the Capitol, the threats to officers.
Now remember, we read that. Right? We read that on January 5th. Remember I said, here he is talking to all these agencies the day before. And the FBI is on the phone and has intelligence that there's going to be an insurrection the next day. And they don't say anything to him. Why? Well, Destiny says, well, they didn't think it was that big of a deal. They didn't think it'd be that many people.
That we were seeing that was...
My understanding is the January 6th committee, I'm not so sure that they ever had Sun testify. He did testify in front of the committee in front of Congress, not a January 6th committee.
That's what's scary.
And to be clear, do we now know for a fact that the people on that call knew about those threats and didn't mention them to you?
So this is what we know for a fact, and I'll tell you, I'm not the only chief that was in the dark. You look at Robert Conte, head of the largest police department in Washington, D.C. He also said the same thing. He wasn't getting the same notifications like the Norfolk memo that came out the day before. He didn't get it. So Steve D'Antuono, who's the Washington Field Office FBI director, you look at the GAO report that came out February of this year. It talks about multiple emails. It's a GAO report, it's a Senate report that just came out in July, just last month. Talks about multiple emails going to Steve D'Antuono on Sunday, Monday, and some probably Tuesday, just the days before, talking about the violence that they're predicting coming up to the Capitol. And I have a video call with him on that Tuesday, and nothing said about it. I mean, that's...
So the head of the Washington Field Office, Steve D'Antuono, who, by the way, was, I believe, the person instrumental in the Gretchen Whitmer. Am I wrong about that? Steve D'Antuono was the guy that was in charge of the Whitmer Fednapping case. Here he is. He's been personally briefed about the insurrection that's about to occur, is on the phone with the police that's going to be tasked with defending, and doesn't bring it up. The day before. Doesn't bring it up.
Didn't mention
That's not a word. Not a word.
So, not to repeat myself, but that just does not make sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Especially when you think about this: the military, the United States military. And this gets really convoluted once you get into the response on January 6th and how I was delayed getting resources. You have the United States military, Secretary of Defense or Acting Secretary of Defense Miller and General Milley had both discussed locking down the city of Washington D.C. because they were so worried about violence at the Capitol on January 6th. On Sunday and Monday, they had been discussing locking down the city, revoking permits on Capitol Hill because of the concern for violence. You know who issues the permits on Capitol Hills for demonstrations? I do. You know who wasn't told? Me. Instead, on January 4th, what does Miller do? He puts out a memo restricting the National Guard from carrying the various weapons, any civil disobedience equipment that would be utilized for the very demonstrations.
So listen to this
it
part
talks
again.
about multiple emails. And this gets really convoluted once you get into the response on January 6th and how I was delayed getting resources. You have the United States military, Secretary of Defense or Acting Secretary of Defense Miller and General Milley had both discussed locking down the city of Washington, D.C. because of...
So Miller and Milley are talking about locking down the city because they're worried that things are going to get violent. Yeah, I'll look at it later, comments. I will, for real. But, like, he's not talking about this stuff necessarily.
They're so worried about violence at the Capitol on January 6th. On Sunday and Monday, they had been discussing locking down the city, revoking permits on Capitol Hill because of the concern for violence. You know who issues the permits on Capitol Hills for demonstrations? I do. You know who wasn't told? Me. Instead, on January 4th, what does Miller do? He puts out a memo restricting the National Guard from carrying the various weapons, any civil disobedience equipment that would be utilized for the very demonstrations or violence that he sees coming. It just doesn't make any sense.
Wait. So the military says we're so concerned about potential imminent violence that we are considering shutting down the city. But at the very same time, they decide that the National Guard can't adopt an aggressive posture.
Right.
The
They're deploying because they're going to be deploying National Guard to assist Washington D.C. with crowd control at metros and some of the traffic control areas. But they put this out on January 4th, specific to January 5th and 6th. And this direction affected the National Guard in Virginia and Maryland. When I was calling begging for assistance on January 6th, they weren't allowed to respond at first. You look at Governor Hogan. He did a press conference saying he was begging to respond and he was not being denied by the Pentagon, all because of the memo.
So why?
So Miller sends the memo that's like, no, they can't really respond on January 4th. Meanwhile, he's talking with Miley about shutting down the city. It's surreal. Right, why?
You know, you begin to wonder why, and especially when you look at things like something that I recently came across when you talk about the military. General Milley, we're now finding out, and it's not from me, this is from Carol Lenning, investigative reporter with the Washington Post, has found that he was using data miner on his own, coming across intelligence.
Tell us what data miner is.
So data miner is an intelligence platform. It's not something your average citizen would have on their computer. I guess it goes in and does crawling across webs. I'm not really sure how it works,
yes.
But it's not it's an intelligence platform. He's picking up intelligence talking about killing members of Congress and attacking the United States Capitol. And he's not telling me. He's telling select members of Congress. I mean, Carol Lenning writes about it in her book. That's concerning as hell because as the chief of police,
So Miley is doing all this research on his own and thinks that there's about to be an insurrection. He's telling certain members of Congress, Democrat members, but he doesn't tell Sund. The top military guy just neglects to tell the guy tasked with security.
There's a duty to warn there, and I should be told so I can take the necessary action. I don't know who else he was telling, but he sure wasn't telling me.
Again, what could possibly be the explanation for that?
I'm not really sure.
But you've done this for over 30 years. You're very familiar. You've been in law enforcement in D.C. specifically for over 30 years. So you know how the city runs. You know how the federal agencies respond to protests. This is not the first violent protest.
Not at all.
There have been many.
I've done many national special security events, and this was handled differently. No, the intelligence, no jib, no coordination, no discussion in advance. It's almost like they wanted it to be watered down, the intelligence to be watered down for some reason. I talked about a little bit in the book that maybe they were concerned for the Trump invoking the Insurrection Act, and they're worried about that. But I've had people, there's those other, thoughts out there. But luckily we still have people investigating this because I still think there's puzzle pieces missing. So they're saying they were afraid of Trump
invoking the Insurrection Act, in other words, optics. So they allowed this attack to occur because they were worried about optics, or there could be other reasons. And he's being very careful because he knows how he'll be smeared if he says the truth, which is they wanted them to get out of control, just like D'Antoni did in the Whitmer Fed hoax, the Fed kidnapping hoax. That's right, Bleezers. They did betray Trump. That's what it was
to
about.
find out what's really behind all this, because it wasn't right the way the intelligence was handled and the way we were set up on the Hill.
Big picture, just to restate, you've seen many things like this, and as you just said, this was very different. This was handled very differently. By whom?
By the intelligence. I'd say one, by the intelligence agency, two, by the military. So the reason why I say the military, think of this. By federal law, Congress passed a law that requires me to go to the Sergeant Arms Capitol Police Board in advance of an event and to request federal resources such as the National Guard. So Congress passed a law. It's 2 U.S. Code 1970. Look it up. Just make
2 U.S. 1970. So the law says that he has to go to the Sergeant at Arms first to request. Oh no, I lost my chat. You still there, chat? Am I still streaming? I don't know. Give me a second. Okay, there we go. We're back. Sorry about that. Whatever. You are here to haunt my dreams. So the law said he had to go through the Sergeant of Arms, one of which was under Nancy Pelosi, the other under Mitch McConnell, and they continued to deny him. But that's the law. That's the step he has to take.
sure you look it up before December 22 when they changed it. So what was in effect on the 6th that requires me to go.
So they changed it, but that's what the law did say.
And get approval for bringing in National Guard or federal assistance in advance. I have to go to the Capitol Police Board and get approval from congressional leadership in advance, like I did on January 3rd. I'm denied twice because of optics and because the intelligence didn't support it. So think about that.
Let me ask you.
So the two reasons he was given that it was denied was optics and because there wasn't intelligence to support it, even though there was. So all of these agencies know, they're talking to members of Congress and other groups saying there's intelligence to support there's about to be an insurrection. He's being told, nope, you can't have the National Guard because the intelligence doesn't support it and because it's bad for optics. This is Capital City Police Chief's son, the guy who was tasked with security on January 6th.
Who made that decision? Who denied you?
I was denied by Paul Irving, House Sergeant Arms, and also Mike Stinger, Senate Sergeant Arms.
And who do
on
they
January
work, who
3rd.
do they work for?
It would have been working for Pelosi on the House side. That Pelosi was the number one boss, and then McConnell on the Senate side.
So effectively, Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi shut down your request.
My request was shut down, one, because of optics, which is interesting. You can hear that term come up a couple more times. Optics, or the look of the National Guard on the Hill. But yeah, in the Capitol Police Board, I mean, it's unbelievable that I'm the only chief of police in the United States that has a law preventing me, not just regulations, rules that say I got to go and get approval to bring in the National Guard, a law. So that's crazy that Congress is going to pass a law that controls.
Well, it's not that the Sergeant at Arms has the ability to mobilize. It's that for Son to even request the National Guard, the Sergeant at Arms has to give him the authority to do so. So the Sergeant at Arms themselves can't say, yes, mobilize. But they can tell him, okay, it's okay for you to pass the request to get the National Guard. He can't even request the National Guard until the Sergeant at Arms gives him the go-ahead, which Pelosi's people and McConnell's people said no.
What I can do to protect the Capitol, and even in emergency. So think of this. Even while we're under attack, I have to go to those same two people to request the National Guard to be brought in. I have 340 National Guard that have been activated. At least 150 to 180 of those are in the city, many of them within eyesight of the Capitol, okay? We got to come under attack at 12:53. 12:55, I called the Washington, D.C. Police Department. I talked to
So wait, let's see. How many people did he say again?
Controls what I can do to protect the Capitol, and even in emergency. So think of this. Even while we're under attack, I have to go to those same two people to request the National Guard to be brought in. I have 340 National Guard that have been activated.
340 people that have been activated. He has to go back to the same people that already denied them once the attack starts. Why would they be denying it? They think that there's going... They actually later requested that the Capitol Police bail out senators. But they're denying him the National Guard.
At least 150 to 180 of those are in the city, many of them within eyesight of the Capitol, okay? We got to come under attack at 12:53. 12:55, I called the Washington, D.C. Police Department. I talked to their Assistant Chief, Jeff Carroll. Thank God I had talked to him at 10:59 in the morning and asked him if he could possibly put some additional resource on Constitution Avenue. And he had some CDU platoons up there. Called him and said, hey, please send those in right away, because we knew as soon as they came to their west front, they started attacking, it was going to be bad. 12:58, I make my first call to the Sergeant Arms, asking, saying, hey, it's bad, we need assistance, I need a declaration of emergency, I need to bring in the military immediately and federal resources. I'm told by Paul, declaration of my first call to the Sergeant Arms, to their west front, they started attacking, it was going to be bad. 12:58, I make my first call to the Sergeant Arms,
12:58. He calls the sergeant at arms.
asking, saying, hey, it's bad, we need assistance, I need a declaration of emergency, I need to bring in the military immediately and federal resources. I'm told by Paul Irving, quote, I'm going to run up the chain, I'll get back to you.
I'll run up the chain and get back to you. 12:58. Now, he has the authority to say, okay, absolutely, there's an attack, but he doesn't.
The chain is Pelosi.
The chain, his chain would be up to Nancy Pelosi. He
So he's going to talk to Pelosi about it.
didn't have to do that, but he wouldn't give me authorization. The law says in emergency he can grant me authorization, but he didn't. He said he'd run up the chain. My next call was over to Mike Stinger. He's now the chairman of the Capitol Police Board. Told him the same thing. We're getting our asses handed to us on the left front. I need federal resources. He said, what did Paul tell you? He said he's run up the chain. He said, let's wait to hear what we hear from Paul. Sorry. So
I could go to the restroom again. I'll be right back.
for the next 71 minutes, I make 32 calls. I'm in the command center. I'm calling my partner agencies. And by law, one of the first people to offer assistance was the United States Secret Service. And by law, I shouldn't have requested their assistance. I shouldn't be until I had approval. But I'm looking at my men and women having their asses handed to them. And my first thought was, fuck it, I will take whatever discipline there is. Send me whatever you got. No, that's the one text Secret Service turned over. You know how they lost all their texts?
Yes.
It's the text between their Chief Sullivan and myself. Thank God for him.
But I don't. So
yeah.
you make this call immediately
Immediately.
to the House Sergeant at Arms, who reports Mr. Irving, who reports to Nancy Pelosi. He says, "I'll call Pelosi."
He says, I'm running up the chain.
Run up the chain, but that is the chain.
Now,
She's
here,
the
now,
next
here, I
link.
got you. I want to tell you exactly what he said to me.
What happens then? Does he get back to you?
So for the next 71 minutes, I make the 32 calls to a number of agencies. 11 of those calls are follow-up calls. And look in the Senate combined report from
31 agencies he calls. Just to go back to bass guitar, that's 31 calls he made to different agencies that are all involved in this conspiracy that they say that we need to let people get killed because that's what Donald Trump dog whistled to us. Can't make that shit up, how insane that comment is, but let's keep going.
From 2001, they have a great infographic of the call after call after call after call. 11 times I call in the next 71 minutes going, where are we on the approval? Where are we on the approval? Because any minute now, I'm going to get any minute. Finally at 2:09, 71 minutes later, 2:09, I'm finally given approval. Think about that. 71 minutes later.
71 minutes. Now, when I talked to Destiny, this is one of the things I said. I don't think that these people wanted Nancy Pelosi to be harmed. I don't think they wanted senators to be harmed. What they wanted was the people to breach the Capitol. And then that's good enough. That's their insurrection narrative. So at that point, they're like, okay, send in the guard. Take care of business. They got what they wanted. At that point, that's what's going on. So for 71 minutes, for some reason, the dude that had the authority to give him permission to get the National Guard is like, let me talk to my boss, who's Nancy Pelosi. 71 minutes, he's denied. Meanwhile, Pelosi will tell you that it was an insurrection starting at like 1 o'clock. So why did they wait 71 minutes?
I immediately called Mike Stinger, said we've got approval. I was so pissed off. I made sure that the watch commander, I'm in the command center, I yelled to John Wisham, the lieutenant, that's my watch commander. I said, John, mark the time as 2:10. I finally got approval for the National Guard. I was that mad.
So what is I just want to pause on this for a minute. It's almost unbelievable. So this is an event that Pelosi herself has likened to Pearl Harbor and 9/11, the worst thing that's ever happened on American soil. And she's in charge of allowing the National Guard to come in and respond, but she doesn't for 71 minutes. What is that?
I can't fathom why. I mean, they had to have known what was going on. I was telling them how bad it was.
It was on TV.
It was on TV. It was right outside of Mike Stinger's office. And they had a meeting in his office saying, hey, where's the National Guard? And they're like, oh, we're trying to make... The fighting's going on right outside his office. And I'm still getting delayed.
This is an unbelievable story.
Oh, it is. Now get a kick out of
Wait,
this.
has anyone ever explained this?
It's verbatim in my book. I have details. The whole chapter on January 6th is almost 100 pages long.
But I don't understand. So we're only 10 minutes into this, and you've told me two things. One, the other federal agencies withheld critical information from you in charge of security at the Capitol before January 6th. And once it started and things got out of control, for 71 minutes, Pelosi refused to allow you to bring in the National Guard. So those are two of the biggest questions from January 6th. And my question is, why don't we have answers to why that happened?
It doesn't seem like people really want to get to the bottom of it. It really doesn't. And it just gets worse. It gets worse from there.
I'm sorry to step on your story. It's shocking.
It is. It is shocking to think that we should be a coordinated security apparatus. There's regulations. There's procedures for defense support for civil authorities. I've taught it for the military. They don't realize they brought me in to actually ask me to actually teach this for foreign governments coming to visit. There's a process for when law enforcement needs help and we dial 911. It's through the military, and that failed. That failed miserably because of the law Congress passed and the denial I was receiving.
Well, it sounds like it was prevented. So Paul Irving, the guy who had, you're saying, the statutory authority to give that okay, has he ever explained why he didn't?
Oh, they had him, and he testified at the Senate hearing in 2001.
2021?
I'm sorry, 2021. My apologies. Thank you for catching. A couple of times he disagreed with my recollection. I can tell you my phone records. I turned them over immediately. I fought to testify. They didn't want me to testify in the Senate hearing. I fought to testify.
Why wouldn't they? Oh, there's so much here. Who didn't want you to testify?
So when
You're the chief of Capitol Police on January 6th. I mean,
you and me are on lockstep with this. My story hasn't changed in 2.5 years. So when they first put out the notice, when they were talking about having the hearing, it was only for current employees that were still in place. No one that was no longer in place in their position in security. So think about that. Initially, when they put out the request to have, they were talking about having the hearing, it would have excluded Paul Irving, would have excluded Mike Stenger, and it would have excluded me. Only 3 people. The 3 people at the top of the security apparatus.
So the Democrats, I think.
Well, it was joint. It was a combined joint. I hear you.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Of course. The Uniparty intentionally excluded the 3 people who would know the answers to the key questions.
Yeah, the original plan was to exclude them. I immediately called somebody I knew on the Rules Committee and said, please, let me testify. I will be there in person. And I still remember, she said, you'll show up in person? I said, I promise you, I will be there in person. I want to testify. And I was the only one that showed up in person.
It just seems like...
Now, why wouldn't they want him to testify? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
The denial of your request to have...
Now, remember, Destiny, when I debated him, kept saying, you don't have any evidence. You don't have any evidence for this. Well, here's the evidence. He has it all written down, the timelines. He testified to all of this.
National Guardsmen who were within eyesight, you saw them, to have them help. That's a pivotal moment on that day. Mm-hmm. And we know the name of the man who made that decision, and we still don't know why he made that decision. And that's just shocking to me. Has he ever answered that question?
No, he's never answered that question specifically that I'm aware of. And I do know when they were talking about the J6 committee coming out, I think it was Representative Benny Thompson had said, Speaker Pelosi is off limits. So they wouldn't get any of her records or phone records.
What do you mean she's off limits?
I believe that was one of the things he said, that her coming into this was she was off limits to the inquiries of the January 6th.
Well, she was running the House that day.
I hear you.
So the Great January 6th committee was told that Nancy Pelosi, who's Sergeant at Arms for 71 minutes, denied the National Guard being there. It was off limits to get her records. But we have to trust. We have to trust the committee. We have to trust them. But they weren't allowed to look into
I mean, if we're truly trying to get to the bottom of this, trying to find out what happened.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, I mean, that's insane.
You would be getting everyone's records. I've been forthright. All my phone records have been turned over. And like I said, there's a description of all the numerous calls I made requesting approval. Think about it. In that 71 minutes, I called in 17 police agencies, 1,700 officers to help us get the Capitol back. And I also made those 11 calls trying to find out where.
You are as precise as an airline pilot in your recollection of things. So yes, and I think everything you have said is provable. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are not.
The book's all based on fact. You can go through it. I reference all the facts I have, footnote. You get access to a lot of the intelligence. I mean, it's fact. My story hasn't changed in 2.5 years.
So just to circle back to this Paul Irving, who played a pivotal role, I think whose name is unknown to most people, even people who follow what happened on January 6th. What happened to him?
No idea. He disappeared shortly thereafter. I haven't heard much from him. Had a couple of conversations with Mike Stenger before he passed away, but nothing from Mr. Irving.
So he was House Sergeant at Arms, and then when did he leave after January 6th?
So it's interesting. So he officially left the 7th, but his signature is on a document making my assistant chief of intelligence the chief of police on the 8th. It's kind of weird the way it worked, but so I guess he was out the 7th or the 8th.
Was he close to Pelosi?
Oh yes. Was he? Oh yeah. He was a very loyal. It's interesting. He was able to go between Republican and Democrat pretty well. He knew how to
Not a
play
huge
the political
difference
game.
on some level.
But he was extremely loyal
to Nancy Pelosi. And it's unclear what happened to him after he left.
No idea.
The Capitol. Has he?
To Paul Irving, the guy for 71 minutes that denied the Guard. I did not know that comment. That Chief Sund is a non-voting member on the board. Only the 2 Sergeant-at-Arms and the Architect could vote. To send in the Guard, you mean? Right. I vaguely knew that, but yes, you're very good. You're very much clearer on me than this. So we haven't got any explanation for why this dude delayed 71 minutes.
Done to your knowledge, we haven't found anybody interviews about.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Was he called to testify before the January 6th committee? Do you
know? I believe he was. I believe there may be. I'm just on a blank right now. Written testimony of his. I know he was one of the 2 that showed up in 2021 for the Senate hearing. He was on video, so was Mike Stenger. and they were asking him about his recollection of when I called him, and he was like, I don't recall that. Now I had my first timing wrong when I went and asked for the initial National Guard. I originally thought it was January 4th, which was Monday, was January 3rd when he denied me the first time.
Even though he apparently, or certainly federal agencies, had intel suggesting this was going to be a bigger than normal protest and could be violent.
Absolutely. Now, when you look back and see some of the intel that was out there, and I reference a lot of it in the book, there's intel talking about going up and killing the palace guards. Those are my officers. There are intel talking about using chemicals at some of the entry points. There's intel indicating that they've done surveillance on some of the entry points at the Capitol. None of that's been included. They talk about burning down the Supreme Court. They talk about different attacks on different members of Congress. And they talk about storming the building. Not a single word of that is included in any of the intelligence assessments. And as a matter of fact, my intelligence unit is putting out documents on the 4th, 5th, and 6th indicating a low probability of civil disobedience.
What?
Yeah.
So, I mean...
You get that? She states this in an interview with OAN. Oh, okay. So I'm going to... Yeah, we'll keep going for a little while. Again, let's pause here for a minute. Think of this. They're getting intelligence that they may use chemical weapons to attack the House, the Capitol. That they're going to intentionally kill guards, police officers. They're having briefings with Sund and his agencies, and they're refusing to tell them this intelligence. So much so that Sund and his agencies putting out memos the day before January 6th saying we expect this to be a usual protest day, like the Million MAGA March. Couple small skirmishes. It's surreal. And the reason Destiny gave was, well, they thought it would just be a handful of people. That's why. Or optics is why he says he was told.
I mean, if you were, and I'm not, but if you were conspiracy minded, you might think that certain agencies concluded there was likely to be chaos at the Capitol, and that served their political purposes, and so they let it happen, and they prevented you from stopping it.
When you tie that into a number of other things that happen, if you haven't, I'd love to take you through some of the military stuff really quick.
And I hope you will at length. And can I just ask, I think most people don't understand that the U.S. military would have a role in a domestic political protest. Why would the U.S. military, which we pay to fight wars abroad, be involved in a protest in the United States?
So the way it would work is, like I said, through a program. A lot of times the military will come out, they'll do support for civil authorities, whether it's COVID response. They did it during the avian flu, but they'll also do it during civil disobedience. We've used them I've activated and sworn in hundreds, if not thousands, of National Guard troops for IMF World Bank, for inaugurations. We'll have them to help line the parade route, just to help us fortify the perimeter. Sometimes we'll have with their QRF, Quick Response Force, in reserve in case we need additional civil disturbance support. So that's how they'll kind of support law enforcement. So 340 were activated for traffic control and management of crowds around metro stations, so they weren't backed up and stuff like that. Not for specific civil disobedience. So we knew we had National Guard in there. And the Defense Support for Civil Authorities program is, if we become overwhelmed, our backstop for law enforcement, and I used up all my resources, and I was overwhelmed, would have been the military, specifically the National Guard. So 209, I get approval to bring the National Guard. Probably 210, 211. My first call, I've already called General Walker. Called General Walker at 151. I was like, I can't wait any freaking longer. I called him, I said, send me the National Guard as quick as you can. I'm going to get approval any minute, because he asked, so we have approval from the Capitol Police Board. And I said, I'll have approval any minute, please. Just
Capitol Police Board, that's
so
CPB.
Within eyesight. Shortly after 209, I talked to them. 234, I get a notification to get on the call with the United States Pentagon. I have to sell my request to the National Guard. I'm on the call with a Lieutenant General Piat, trying to make sure I have his name pronounced right, and a General Flynn is on the call. And it was mainly Piat that I'm speaking with. I get on the call, Mayor Bowser's on the call, Chief Conti's on the call. And I said, I need the National Guard immediately. This is an urgent situation. I still remember saying urgent twice. This is urgent. They got to be looking at the same TVs I'm looking at. I need the National Guard immediately. You know what his response is? Don't like the optics of the National Guard on Capitol Hill. He goes, I'd rather have your officers in the fight, and we can backfill your officers somewhere else. I said, I don't have that option. All my officers are in the fight. He goes, I'm telling you, I don't like the option of the National Guard. I don't like the optics of the National Guard on the Hill. I said, sir, we're having our asses handed to us. This is life or death. I need assistance immediately. And I still remember, he said, my recommendation is not to support the request. I still remember Robert Conti going, whoa, hold on. You're denying the chief of the Capitol Police? And he goes, Vegas, not that we're denying him. I just don't like the optics of the National Guard on Capitol Hill. And he goes, and he goes back to that again, I'd rather backfill your people. I said, sir, I don't have that option.
This sounds like a setup to me.
You hear that? Now that's the guy, the Piat from the Army. No, I don't like you. But wait a minute, that bass guitar guy told us it was a crazy conspiracy theory. Remember? I guess the guy from the CIA, Piat, the Army, I guess he's involved in it as well, right? So imagine your frustration if you're this guy. Not only do you find out after the fact that there was actual credible intelligence that there was going to be an attack, and you were intentionally kept in the dark about it, And despite that, you had a gut feeling to request the National Guard and it was turned down. Then once the attack occurs, for 71 minutes you're begging, because there's a law that says that you can't directly request the Guard unless the Sergeant-at-Arms says so. You're begging the Sergeant-at-Arms under Pelosi, please let me ask for the National Guard. And he's refusing to do so for 71 minutes. Then finally you get that permission, so you talk to the National Guard and you're like, okay, all I gotta do is get the next step of permission and you come in. 30 minutes later, you talk to a big group of people, and the guy that speaks up from the Army is like, nah, I'm sorry, I don't like the optics. And he says, it's life or death, for God's sakes, you gotta send these people. I'm sorry, I just don't like the optics. And this is, we're supposed to believe that a career military person at the top of the Army in Pyatt was just like, I'm sorry, I don't like the optics. And that's good enough for Destiny and the Democrats. That's good enough for Nancy Pelosi. That's good enough for Pisco and all these people I debate. Good enough for them. Well, okay. If they said optics, I guess they just had to leave Mike Pence die and these officers be overwhelmed because of optics. Who could believe this with a straight face?
Sorry, it does.
It gets better. So I beg, and he goes, well, I'm going to walk down the hall and we'll talk to the Secretary of Defense or whoever he's going to talk to. Right then I get notification. Oh, so I'm still on the call. We have the shooting of Ashley Babbitt. And I said, we have shots fired. I still remember yelling over the phone. We have shots fired on the University Capitol. Is that urgent enough for you now? Hang up the phone, because now I got to start making my notifications. I got to call the Sergeant Arms saying, hey, we got what looks like maybe a confirmed shooting. Do you know when the National Guard finally arrived? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. they're sworn in on post. Do you know there's National Guard, the 150 to 180 that are within eyesight of the Capitol? You know what they do with them? They put them in vehicles, drive them around the Capitol back to the D.C. Armory. You know where the D.C. Armory is.
It's far away, yeah.
Washington,
Yes.
White House is on one side, United States Capitol, D.C. Armory almost equidistant on the other
RFK
side.
Stadium,
by RFK Stadium. They drive them back then, and they send me in the evening trips.
Not really.
Can you freaking believe it? No, that's real. That's real. And you know what else I do? While I'm begging for assistance, the Pentagon sending resources to generals' houses to protect their homes, but not me. So
you can tell how pissed off he is. Do you see how pissed off he is? Does this come across as a guy that's like bullshitting about this? Yeah, and like Two-Face says, he was forced to resign 2 days later. They threw his ass under the bus. The only guy that was right. How could anyone... And again, what are the explanations? The only two explanations we've given are because of optics, or the explanation that I'm giving, and it seems like Sun's agreeing with, that this was a cover-up, that they wanted it to get out of hand. Thanks, Gravy Rolls. That's actually a very worthwhile message to bring in. I really respect that.
you begin to think, it seems a little conspiratorial. I can see where somebody, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I can see where people begin to go down that rabbit hole real quick.
That rabbit hole, I mean, I don't know what the other conclusion is. Because, look, under pressure, people make mistakes and make bad decisions. But you're describing a systematic denial of intelligence and then of support, defense, through a whole bunch of different agencies, a whole bunch of different people, all reaching the same baffling conclusion that we're not going to protect the Capitol.
Right. Multiple agencies with people with extensive experience, and you're getting this type of response. And when you look at the level of intelligence, it's baffling that nobody put anything out ahead of time.
Maybe it's not baffling. I mean, remember, this was the end of the Trump administration. A month, almost 2 months into a contested election. This is a politically charged moment with ramifications that we're now living through. But there's a lot at stake here. This is not just your average protest, correct?
Correct. There is.
Did you feel that? Did you feel a political vibe coming off these decisions at the time, or were you just showing your law
Oh
enforcement?
no, I was looking at the cameras that were surrounding me with my officers, the men and women of the Capitol Police and the other law enforcement agencies, in a fight for their life. All I wanted to do was get them resources. And I hadn't even sat back and at that point started thinking about the political aspects of it.
I should say, just because this is our second conversation, I feel like I know you at this point. You're not political. I mean, you were a beat cop who rose and became a chief of police, a very prominent one. And so, but you never, you weren't like working in politics on the side like a lot of these people.
No, and you'll find if you look through it, and I talk about it in the book, I try and be as apolitical as possible.
I can tell.
Because I think that is extremely important in the application of law. I'm a rule of law type of guy, but especially being in Washington D.C. and special ops, we did demonstrations all the time, First Amendment activity. You have to be apolitical. You got to go in. It doesn't matter. You have a right to First Amendment freedom of speech. It doesn't matter if I agree with you or not, but I have to take an apolitical approach to provide you security. And I believe it's important. You don't need to know what the political leanings of a cop are that's stopping you on a traffic stop. You should never know that. So I'll always be apolitical when it comes into law enforcement because that's how it has to be.
Amen. So by the time the National Guard actually show up at 6 p.m., they're not needed, correct?
The fight's over. So the whole time they were concerned about the optics of the National Guard showing up. They show up. I have an official swear them in as special police officers. They take them. They line them up with their shields. All the protesters are off. They line them up with their shields, and they take a couple pictures for military magazines and stuff like that of them lined up with the Capitol in the background. The very optics they said they were so.
Right. So when they get the National Guard there, the same people that were worried about optics, what do? Have them take a photo op for optics. They were so concerned about the optics of the National Guard at the Capitol that the first thing they had them do was line up to take pictures of them in front of the Capitol. Can someone explain it?
Concerned about.
They took pictures from military magazines?
Think about it. You can look it up. You can look up on some of the, go online, look
Like
up.
we're the heroes of January 6th?
Yeah, we're the heroes of January. Yeah. So, you know, and I appreciate I come from a military family. I appreciate the men and women in military. And I will tell you, when they finally showed up, New Jersey State Police beat them to the Capitol before the D.C. National Guard arrived at the Capitol. I had D.C. National Guards, men and women, that were infuriated. They were so pissed off that they weren't allowed to respond. They were extremely upset.
Wait, cops drove from New Jersey
Yes, sir.
before the National Guard could
Yes,
get
I
from
put
the
out-
armory on Capitol Hill to the Capitol?
I put out a request, a mutual aid request that went all up and down the National Capital Region, went up to,
Why isn't this story everywhere?
I have no idea. I have no idea. General Walker even said, he called me up, he said, Steve, I felt so bad. I pulled up on the scene. He's the head of the D.C. National Guard. He said, I pulled up on the scene and the New Jersey State Police beat us to the Capitol. He said he wasn't allowed to go. He repeatedly wanted to go and the Pentagon wasn't allowed.
And yet the Pentagon celebrated the guardsmen who showed up at 6 p.m. when everything was done as heroes. Meanwhile, they sent other guardsmen to protect the homes of generals.
Yeah, send other resources. I don't know if they're Guard or Pentagon Force Protection or what, but the kicker is this. The Department of Defense, and they interviewed me. I wouldn't have been interviewed by anybody because I'm telling the truth. They interviewed me. I provided them all my phone records. They were part of all the records. You know, they put out a report saying the actions of the United States military was appropriate considering the circumstance.
Was appropriate?
It's online. Yeah, go look up the
No one apologized.
No one apologized. They said
No
their
one was
actions
fired.
their actions were appropriate. You know, they had an emergency response authority under DISCA to respond immediately, and they didn't.
Do you think that the Pentagon was gathering intelligence before and during January 6th?
Well, when you look at the fact that, you know, Miller, specifically Milley was talking about locking down the city, he had to have some pretty damn concerning intelligence. That's a pretty big stretch for the government, for the military to talk about locking down the capital city and revoking First Amendment permit.
In a democracy, that would be a big
I
step.
mean, that's a big stretch.
It's close to a coup, actually.
Yeah,
at that
and then when
point.
you hear about some of the stuff he was getting online and he was only talking to members of Congress, it raised a lot of concerns.
Does the Pentagon, does Defense Intelligence Agency have undercover intel operatives that you're aware of?
I have no idea. And I think it is important since you bring up the intelligence. It's important for people to realize, again, as United States Capitol Police, we're not part of the intelligence community, the technical IC. There's 18 agencies. 9 of those agencies are military agencies. So that gives you an idea of how heavily weighted.
Half of the IC is military.
Half of the IC is military. So,
But I think the average person imagines that military intelligence is not allowed constitutionally to function on American soil.
yeah, you'd think, I don't
As
know
we're not ruled by a
specifically.
junta.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics, but you'd think
But
that
in
it
your
would be.
career, have you seen evidence that the half of the IC, half of those 18 intel agencies, the military ones, are working in the United States?
I've never received, in my times of doing the special events, demonstrations, intel briefings, I've never received intel from the military. So it's always been, the DHS, FBI, it's always been from those folks. Never anyone said, hey, we got this from military intelligence.
So in the aftermath of January 6th, there's been a huge debate over to what extent, there were federal agents or people who are working in some way for federal agencies in the crowd. And the initial explanation was, well, none, and you're insane if you think that. You're Alex Jones, you're crazy. And then over the last couple of years, we've seen people in authority confirm, actually, yeah, there were a lot in the crowd that day. I mean, that's now a fact. Did you know that going in?
No.
No. So just for perspective, since you've been to a lot of these events, there's a huge planned demonstration in Washington, D.C. Will there always be assets, agents, people working for federal agencies in the crowd in civilian clothes?
There always could be, and for like inaugurations, there would usually be some combined teams out there, one for communications, but just for situational awareness. So it wouldn't be surprising, 4th of July, different things like that, where you have threat pictures or concerning threat pictures.
And what does that look like? Does that mean FBI agents dressed in Dockers and tennis shoes trying
Well,
to?
it'd just be plain clothes, plain clothes to blend in. So that wouldn't be unusual, and it'd be just standard police work. It'd be good police work. So coming into January 6th, and I talk about it in the book with the fact that shortly after January 6th, I'm driving through Loudoun County. I just talked to somebody from the Hill, and I get a call from overseas, and it's press. I don't remember what it was. It's somebody from Great Britain, and they started asking me about feds in the crowd. And I was like, no, I would have been told. I said, no, we're getting word that there was feds in the crowd. I said, no, I would have been told. I've got lots of friends with the bureau. They all have my cell phone number. They would have told me. Thinking about that, and Jill Sanborn's testimony in 2021, where she said they're taking overt action to keep certain people from coming to January 6th to Washington, D.C. That's big for FBI to start taking overt action. I mean, that's not covert, overt. That's a big deal. Fast forward to February of this year, 2023, in the GAO report that says on January 3rd, the FBI was tracking 4 domestic terrorists that were talking about coming to Washington, D.C. The Washington Field Office, their AOR, Area of Responsibility. By January 6th, they were tracking 18 or 19. It's in the GAO report. Domestic terrorists. So think about that. They have 18 or 19 domestic terrorists coming to this event. So of course they're going to have resources on them, and they're not, you're not going to just put one agent. You're going to have multiple. So it'd be multiple with that. And I don't know how many they actually had. So that would be regular standard police work. So I would be surprised by that, but not to share that in the intelligence, that's concerning.
So I mean, it seems like common sense suggests anyway that you would have to tell the chief of Capitol Police that, hey, we've got our guys in the crowd, like just because. I mean, you would want to know the difference, correct?
You would absolutely want to know the difference, and deconfliction. You want to have things
right.
like that. A lot of the folks will already know there's a lot of standard procedures for deconflict so you don't have blue on blue type of situations. You'll have that. I will say this and just really quick.
So that would because you have perspective, that would be the conventional way, the by the book way to do it. FBI would call you and say, hey, we're worried about people in the crowd, and we've got our guys there too. Here's who they are.
Yeah. So just to deconflict operations, they wouldn't necessarily call me. They might call my deputy chief that's in charge of my intel, and their
but they would
people.
call Capitol Police,
You coordinate. You coordinate with DC police. You coordinate with Park Police. You coordinate with Secret Service, just so everyone kind of knew what was going on. And really quickly, I do want to say this. Nowhere do I want to imply or indicate that I feel that agents instigated this or in any way like that. I'm never saying that. I haven't said that. And a lot of these agencies came to my defense on January 6th, FBI,
Yes.
Secret Service, stuff like that. So I just want to make sure that's clear. But there would have been some coordination. And when you look at it and you think with the intelligence coming in, if you think there's 19 domestic terrorists coming to Washington, D.C., somehow that would have been included in some type of report. And when you look at the FBI's procedures, policies and procedures, and again, go online, the Attorney General's guidance for domestic operations of the FBI specifically says the FBI is to do an assessment which includes intelligence assessments of events that they're identifying as being the target of possible threats and possible violence. I think that would have been the United States Capitol on January 6th. Look through that document, outline it in the book, and see all the repeated failure after failure after failure of their own procedures to start identifying intelligence and making proper notifications.
So, but it does raise, and I don't have the answer to this question, and I hope I don't ever pretend that I do, but it does raise questions about the behavior of some of the people in the crowd who were instigating others to break the law, and who weren't arrested. And given our facial recognition software capabilities, hard to believe they can't be found. And I would specifically cite a man called Ray Epps, who's now a hero on the left and funded by the Democratic Party, et cetera, but take the politics out of it. What is that? Here you have a guy on camera repeatedly saying, we're going to the Capitol.
We need to go into the Capitol! Into the Capitol!
Thank you, Levin.
And he's not in jail when people who didn't go into the Capitol are in jail. What do you make of that?
Again, that's something I actually address in the book. It's funny. There's a lot in here. So my concern with that, and I look at it from a chief of police point of view, is you have somebody that's down, and I believe he's right near the old executive office building on the 5th, the day before January 6th, talking to a group of people talking about we have to get into the building, we have to get into the building. And then the next day to see him at what's called the Pennsylvania Avenue Gate. It's one of the two fence lines I had down at the west front. And he's there, and he clearly sees the banner, the metal crowd control barriers that are up with the signs saying restricted, so he knows that's a restricted area. And he's up there, and you see him lean in, and he whispers in somebody's ear, and he covers his mouth in such a way so you can't read his lips or anything. Whispers in somebody's ear, and that person moments later is attacking my officers. That's suspicious as hell to me. It raised a lot of concerns.
What is that?
And what's interesting is I believe...
and that's verified. The person into whose ear he whispered...
Yeah, I think if you watch the video, you see that, and that person immediately go and start pulling on the gate and start fighting with the officers. And what's interesting is when I believe he went on 60 Minutes, and on 60 Minutes, what he said was he went up to the officer and he told that officer, these officers are on our side. Don't hurt these officers. I believe that was pretty much not verbatim, but don't hurt these officers. They're on our side. Don't hurt these officers. Well, if that's the case, why would you cover your mouth and not yell it to everybody? Because it didn't seem like that protester was the only one that was possibly going to be hurting the officers. We got a whole bunch of people actually. Why wouldn't he tell it to the whole group?
I don't know. I know that Epps is being encouraged by partisan Democrats to sue people who raise these questions, but they're fair questions, and I'm going to raise them anyway. How, given that tape, could the January 6th committee defend Ray Epps, which they did? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm having trouble answering that one. I don't know.
Interesting. How many federal agents, officers, assets, people connected with federal agencies do you think were in the crowd? Do you have any idea?
I really have no idea.
More or fewer than normal, would you say?
Well, if you have, again, going back to what I'm reading now in the GO report with 19 domestic terrorist possibly coming in, I've never seen anything like that in Washington, D.C., so you may have a larger than usual presence.
Amazing. Who's Yogananda Pittman?
Yogananda Pittman was my assistant chief for intelligence and security. Security.
Okay. So did she have the intelligence that you didn't have?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
I don't know. You don't know what you don't know. I
Well,
don't know.
no point.
I don't know what she had and what she didn't have, but I do know that when you look at it, and we immediately knew. I mean, anybody immediately knew. One of the first things you start thinking about is this an intelligence failure? So think about it. We go through January 6th. I was begging for the National Guard, refused before, refused during it. We get the Capitol under control. I get them to where they can go back into session, 7:30. They elect to go in at 8, and then the House goes at 9. But nonetheless, so think about this. The very next day, less than 24 hours after we got control of the Capitol, Nancy Pelosi goes on national TV, blames leadership at the top of Capitol Police, calls for my resignation on national TV, and then lies about me. Okay? The very next day, puts it, Yogananda Pittman as acting chief.
But Yogananda Pittman, you just described her as the head of intelligence for
Correct.
Capitol Police.
Correct.
So if there was an intelligence failure, which again doesn't seem like a failure, it seems very intentional to me, but if there was such a failure, she'd be responsible, correct? Or she'd be in the chain of responsibility anyway.
Well, I mean, she was the head of intelligence. So if there's an intelligence failure, my thing is, do a proper analysis. Why do a knee-jerk reaction? I mean, putting her in charge. I mean, she ended up getting a vote of no confidence, so she didn't get the position from the police officers because many were upset with what happened.
Where did she wind up?
Where's she now?
Yeah.
She's chief of police for the University of California, Berkeley.
Interesting. So right across from Nancy Pelosi's district.
That is correct.
In the Bay Area.
That is correct.
So you just kind of take the Bay Bridge over there, and that's where she is now. What does that position pay? Do you know?
I think it pays pretty well. There was
pays extraordinarily well.
I'm sure it pays. I'm sure it pays pretty good. It's interesting. There was a hearing just recently that was it's on TV. You can look at it, where the chief of police, Tom Manger, was asked about her position. It turns out that she was given some type of a secret leave, so she could start her job on February 1st as the chief of police, and not retire from the Capitol Police for months later.
Oh, so she should get the benefits.
Yeah, think about that. Yeah, it appears to be against department policy. And nobody
No,
allegedly was told.
what you're saying is that the head of intelligence for the Capitol Police, which demonstrably didn't have the intelligence it needed to protect the building, that person was first elevated to acting chief of Capitol Police and then given a very high-paying job right across from Nancy Pelosi's district at the University of California, Berkeley.
That is correct. And I will say this.
So that looks like a reward to me.
Well, I do know that the unit had significant intelligence, and I know many people within the unit were pushing that intelligence up to the leadership of the unit. So I do know that. Many of them became whistleblowers, and many of them were punished and forced to resign. Yep.
This looks like a scam.
I mean,
Just saying.
It just gets more convoluted. I do. I feel so bad for the men and women in the police department, what they went through. I feel so bad for the intelligence analysts and what they went through. Many of them, it was really, really bad. I feel bad for the officials that were either demoted, forced to resign over this, forced to retire early. There's a lot of people that need someone. I think an outside entity needs to come in and do some investigation about what went on.
We've had many entities doing investigations. Yeah. I believe we impaneled this committee or commission, this body of members of Congress that went on for about a year and was on the news every single night. Did they address any of these questions?
No, sir.
How could you have a January 6th commission whose job it is to figure out what happened on January 6th, not get to the bottom of why the head of intelligence at Capitol Police didn't pass on the intelligence, why the chief of Capitol Police was kept in the dark and denied support from the U.S. military, why Yogananda Pittman wound up after failing on January 6th, getting a high-paying job right across from Nancy Pelosi's district? Who wouldn't ask these questions?
Yeah, well, I know there's people on the Hill still trying to ask those questions, and hopefully they can get answers, but it looks like they keep running into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. But it's hard to believe 2.5 years later, we're still at this point. I still think somebody along the line is going to find, the smoking gun, missing puzzle piece, and put this together, but it does.
Well, I disagree with that.
More to it, it just begins to raise more and more questions.
It's interesting to talk to you because, this is my assessment, you seem like a very straight arrow guy.
I try.
It comes off you in waves. So, and I mean that's a compliment, but how long did it take you to realize there's something very strange going on?
I knew there was something strange going on pretty soon. When I was running into the issues with them not wanting me to testify, I was like, this starts getting a little weird. And then when I started sitting down and talking to officers and getting information, and finding out from some of the intelligence that was out there and where it was, and seeing some of the emails of the intelligence analysts pushing it up to their officials, I knew something was fishy. I mean, think about it. How can somebody not look at all this and think something's odd?
So, I mean, we have a media whose job it is to get to the bottom of questions like these, or at least to ask the questions of knowledgeable people with relevant experience, and you're at the top of that list. We interviewed you, never aired, at a previous job, but how many other long interviews have you done with media outlets?
Long ones, not very many. I actually can't think of any. I've done 60 minutes. That's probably about the longest.
And how long, from your 60 minutes interview, how much of your account wound up on top?
So we'll leave it go there. Yeah, no one's interviewed him, really. Now, tomorrow night, I will be on the Crucible at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I'll be debating Pisco on this topic. But first, we'll be talking a little Jamal Bowman. We're going to be talking about that. But you can go through my Twitter, and you can see the exchanges I'm having today. They're making some incredible, stupid arguments that they've been baited into. So first, let me address a clip that they show. I actually can't play it because it's Destiny talking, and it's banned on Twitch. But basically, they take a segment. And what happens when I talk to Destiny is this. He'll ask me a question, and I'll start talking, and then he cuts me off in 3 seconds. And then he'll go off and yell and scream for 2 minutes, and then I'll get a chance to talk, and he cuts me off. And so he kept saying, I don't have any evidence, blah, 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 things like that. It'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern time on the Crucible. Andrew Wilson will be moderating. What my point was the whole time, what I'm talking about is you have all these people with intelligence that suggest this is going to be really bad, that it's going to be an insurrection, that they may attempt to kill people, right? And then January 6th kicks off, and it starts to be a riot, and it starts to get out of control. And these people, like the people with the Sergeant-at-Arms, are denying the ability to allow the National Guard, right? They're denying it over and over and over, denying. And I said, if you believe, and Destiny's reason is for optics, that's why. Because of optics. That's why they were denying it. And my claim is, and I kept trying to get this out, and Destiny was just rambling on and interrupting me, but I sat there patiently. Optics, optics, optics. That's what he's saying. So my point was this. If you're someone who had the ability to take the steps to deploy the National Guard, and you're aware of intelligence that there's going to be an impending insurrection and attempt on people's lives, and you didn't make those steps, then you wanted the outcome. And Destiny goes, that's Donald Trump. That's it. That's exactly what Trump was. Trump had the ability to deploy the Guard, and he didn't. So therefore, that's him. That's what you're talking about. What Pisco did was he cut a minute and a half of that exchange, and then he cuts it off right before I get to answer. Now, even in the actual debate, I don't get a chance to answer immediately because Destiny just keeps cutting me off. But that's the clip that they cut. And then, of course, that's the big gotcha. Much like when I debated Destiny on the trans issues, and their editor cuts it and then cuts out literally the part 30 seconds later where I say, no, Destiny, you're literally making my argument. And he goes, yeah, you're right. They cut that part out, and they just leave it on Destiny rambling like, oh, that's it. My answer to that was as follows. The answer that I was able to give as I was being interrupted over and over was, clearly I'm talking about people that had intelligence that this was going to be an insurrection, which Trump did not have. He was never briefed by the FBI. He was never briefed by these people, the military, telling him there was an impending insurrection. But all of these people in the chain of command were at the FBI, the Army, they all had intelligence. Right? Right, the FBI does do this all the time. The other thing is, which I didn't get a chance to specifically say, is Trump delegates his authority. We don't expect the president to understand the on-the-ground tactical situation. For example, if I become president, I'm going to assume when it comes to matters of security of myself or security of DC and the buildings in DC, I'm going to assume the professionals that are tasked with security are handling the security. I'm not going to go in and be like, who are we deploying here? I want 7 more men here. Which agencies have we talked to about being over here on the west flank? Now, like fucking Napoleon or something. Thank you so much, Grader. What's he got the old, chess pieces set up with the stick, and he's like, no, around this map, blah, blah, blah. Like, he delegates. Similarly, a military situation. A military base is attacked in real time. I don't expect the president or any president to be like, I want security here and here. They might be like, Mr. President, do you want us to deploy aircraft? And he might say, sure. But it's not going to be like, he's going to be like, If he's not contacted, he's not going to chime in and be like, why haven't you done this? Why aren't there more guards stationed here? It's absurd. It's clear I'm talking about the people whose task it was to provide security. The people, the sergeant at arms, the people in the National Guard, Pyatt from the military, those people that are on the call directly talking about security, that are listening to in real time the guy in charge of security saying, please, my God, send me the National Guard. And they're like, nah, optics. Those are the people I'm clearly talking about. This is what the Destinys, the Piscos, the Democrats of the world want you to believe. The sergeant at arms under Nancy Pelosi that refused to give authority for the National Guard, maybe a mistake, no big deal. Pyatt from the Army that said he didn't want it for optics, maybe a bad decision, no big deal. But because Trump didn't overrule them and say, no, I want the National Guard, or he didn't pick up the phone and call, I'm going to call Pyatt, I'm going to call Walker, I'm going to call Stevenson, because he didn't pick up the phone and call them. Not only does that mean Trump was wrong, and I don't even have a problem if you argue Trump was wrong not to do that. I think that that's iffy, but they say that's evidence of an insurrection. You get that? So the people tasked with security are like, no, we don't want the National Guard. But because Trump didn't deploy the National Guard or didn't pick up the phone and call them, then that means he engaged in an insurrection. Do you understand? Well, then you might say, well, does that mean that Pyatt, who said he didn't want the National Guard, engaged in an insurrection? No, it was just a mistake. For him, it was just a mistake. What about the sergeant at arms? No, it was just a mistake. See, for them, it was mistakes. But for Trump, it's an insurrection. You get that? Now, Pisco and others would say in almost every other situation that the president should defer to experts. And this is the argument. So I put out a video today and I said, okay, if we're going to blame Trump because he has the authority and he didn't call in the National Guard, thank you, Galil. Thank you for the sub. If we're going to blame Trump, well then, we have to blame President Biden for allowing the Chinese spy balloon to fly the whole way across the country. Seeing as how Biden's son worked for the, and I'm quoting now, spy chief of China, and Biden left that spy balloon go the whole way across the country, well, that's clear evidence that Biden's aiding and abetting our enemy. He should be removed. Now, of course, that's actually an absurd take, because Biden might have input like, hey, should we shoot that down? What should we do? But ultimately, he's going to rely on his generals, his military people. And I totally respect that. Even if I ultimately disagree, in that moment, he's going to rely on them. So it's hard to say, if all of his generals said, hey, Biden, we can't shoot this down for XYZ, I'm not going to say, But nope, Biden ultimately is the chief executive of the military. He had the right to make the decision. So if the wrong decision wasn't made, that's proof that he was engaged in treason. Why didn't Trump step in? For various reasons. First off, he did. At 2:28, he gave a text message. So remember, his speech is over at 1. Like 10 after 1 or something like that. Then he's driving around. He's also incredibly worried about, he thinks this is the last day to stop the election being stolen from him. So he's on the phone trying to talk to people to see how he can stop what he believes is a stolen election. He gives a tweet at 2:28, it's like, hey, be peaceful, respect police officers, they're on our side. By the way, a tweet that would end up being removed by Twitter. Then at 4 o'clock or whatever, he sends out a message, everybody go home. I think there's legitimate criticism to be made of could he have spoke up and said more sooner. I don't deny that. I don't think that that's evidence that he engaged in an insurrection or that he wanted violence. I think it's a guy who was single-focused, that he thought the election was stolen and this was his last chance. But anyways, that's the tweet I made. Pisco falls into 2 traps on this day, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Right? The first trap is he says, oh, this is ridiculous. Rob, it's like this. It's like this, Rob. How is it that you wanted Trump to ignore the experts on everything else? So ignore the military experts on withdrawal of Syria. Ignore Fauci and the COVID experts. But this one time, you wanted him to listen to the experts. Because the experts, the security experts, are saying, no, don't deploy the Guard for optics. And I said, Pisco, the exact opposite is the truth. First off, it doesn't matter what I want. What matters is, it's not that Pisco's saying, I would have preferred that Trump called. Pisco's saying, Trump didn't call, and that's further evidence that he engaged in an insurrection. So what Pisco's saying is, I think Trump should listen to the experts. I think he should listen to Fauci. I think he should listen to Miley in the military when it comes to military. But on this particular day, on January 6th, I think he should have not listened to the experts saying not to deploy the Guard. He should have overruled them. And because he didn't, well, that's evidence he engaged in an insurrection. That's insane. That is absolute insanity. Then I make the comment, I say, here's the problem Trump was in. If he deployed the National Guard, people would have said, he's an authoritarian. Here we go. Trump's using the military against the people of the country. But if he didn't deploy the Guard, people said, he's an insurrectionist. So either way, he was screwed. And Pisco says, bullshit. No one would have said he was an authoritarian if he deployed the Guard. No one would have said that. Does anyone understand the trap which I knew Pisco would fall into? You understand the trap he just fell into? Let me repeat. Let me repeat what Pisco just said. It is absolutely bullshit that any Democrat or anyone would have accused Trump of being an authoritarian if the National Guard had been deployed January 6th. Does anyone see the trap he just fell into? There's a significant problem with that statement. It is a trap. Akbar style. What was the reason that was given by people in the chain of command, such as Pyatt from the military, to not deploy the Guard? What's the reason Destiny said they didn't deploy the Guard? What was the reason these people said? Anyone remember? What's the official stated reason that was testified to? No, it wasn't fog of war. It was optics. That's right, B-Gob, optics. And Destiny and his supporters routinely ask, do you really know what Destiny's saying when he means optics? Yes, of course. I even directly talked to Destiny about what he means. What he's saying is, people were worried that had the Guard been deployed, that it would have been Trump seen as deploying the Guard to sort of protect himself, to leave him stay in power. That he would have deployed the Guard to help him consolidate power and not leave office. That would be the optics. In other words, Trump would have been seen as making an authoritarian move had he deployed the National Guard. That's the argument that was being. We just don't like the optics of Trump deploying the Guard. That's the argument Destiny and them are making. But then Pisco says, that's entirely bullshit. No Democrat would have made that argument. None. Okay, sounds good, Pisco. Then explain to me why all of these people lied. Explain to me why Pyatt lied then, when he talked about optics. How did Pisco know more than Pyatt? Because Pisco's like, that's absurd. No one would have made that argument. Every Democrat would have been like, okay, it's okay to use the Guard right now. We understand. We don't think it's optically bad because this unique situation requires the National Guard being sent. Except the people that had the authority to go ahead and give the go-ahead said, no, we don't want to because of optics. Now that would seem to me, if I'm Pisco, I would say, so wait a minute. The people that were responsible for the delay of the National Guard, the actual security experts who are being begged and given the evidence, we need the Guard right now, on a phone call that we're saying, no, we can't because of optics, they're lying. Because no one in the world, no Democrat, and certainly then no Republican would have said, we don't like Trump deploying the Guard for authoritarian reasons. So then Pyatt's lying. He's lying under oath. Why? What's the alternative explanation? And Pisco, he can't get around it. Pisco then tries to, instead of just admitting like, yeah, you're right, that's fucked up. He's like, well, it's an absurd statement, but that doesn't make it a lie. That's what he tries to say. So now what Pisco's going to try to say is like, well, I guess maybe a handful of people could have said, you can't have your cake and eat it too. One of these two things true. One, if Trump would have deployed the Guard, he was fucked because people said he was an authoritarian. Or if he didn't deploy it, they would say he's an insurrectionist. Or two, no, as Pisco said, no one would have accused him of being an authoritarian. Then Pyatt and all the people that said optics lied. So then the question is, why aren't they being charged and investigating for lying under oath? And secondly, what was their actual motivation then? Why would they lie? See, Destiny's entire argument is, but they said it was optics under oath. They said it was optics under oath. And then Destiny's little lawyer Orbiter says, that's absurd. That's a lie to think. Anyone would have thought it would have been authoritarian for Trump to deploy the Guard on January 6th. Who's wrong, Pisco or Destiny? One of them's wrong. But Pisco's going to say, no, I defend what Destiny said. How? How can you defend it? And that's what the debate's going to be about tomorrow. It's not that I don't have evidence. It's when we have a situation that occurs, we look at what most likely scenarios are. It's 4 people. Again, I already gave the example. If 4 cops testify under oath, no, actually, we didn't plant drugs on that guy. We all were carrying drugs to the evidence room, and then all 4 of us, it fell out of our pocket at the same time onto that guy. Sorry, it was an act. If all 4 of them testify under oath, that doesn't mean that that's the most likely scenario, because it beggars belief. Similarly, it beggars belief that you are a career security or military professional who has evidence that there's an impending insurrection. You have the guy tasked with defense begging you, saying, my God, we're being overran. Send the National Guard. And you say, yeah, it does look like they might get in and maybe kill Congress people, but I don't think we should send the Guard because of optics. That rationale is so unbelievable that even though it was testified under oath, doesn't mean that it's the most likely scenario or true. And then ask yourself this, if somehow that's not persuasive to you, if somehow it's not, you have to at least admit, wow, that sounds really shitty. It sounds really shitty what they did. That is gross incompetence. Then the question becomes, why is it the same people that are on television crying about January 6th, why aren't they concerned with getting to the bottom of this? Why aren't they concerned? Why didn't the January 6th committee call in Captain Sun to testify? It's almost like they weren't concerned about it. They keep saying, I don't have evidence. I absolutely have evidence. The evidence is overwhelming. The facts, for example, and again, we're talking about 2 scenarios. What happened immediately before January 6th, and then what happened the day of January 6th. As I went through with someone earlier here, he says, but you don't have facts. Sure I do. I have the fact that the FBI and other agencies, DHS, others, and the military had intelligence that there was going to be an insurrection that tried to kill people. According to Sun, 19 domestic terrorists were coming. 19 terrorists! Isn't that how many were there, 9/11? But Destiny's like, that's not a big number. That's not enough to worry them. I don't know if that's true or not, Critical. I believe my understanding that I'm operating, that the president could snap his fingers in D.C. and say, I want the Guard deployed now. I think that he requested and was denied on the 3rd or the 4th. So it would have been, people would have complained if he just overruled that and said, well, I'm sending in the Guard anyways. But do I know Counter's opinion? Counterpoints? I don't know. That could be true comments. If you send me, I'm willing to read anything you have on that topic. I really am. The president requires the legislative branch to call in the National Guard. I'm happy to see it. I have not read that. But you send me something, I honestly will. You could send it to my Twitter feed, direct message me on Twitter, to my email, or you could just put it in the chat here. But I will be going here in the next 15 minutes. But my understanding is the president could say, I know in the states he needs the governors to give the authority, or certain people, state officials, to give the authority. But I think D.C., because it's federal district, he's ultimately, my understanding was he was the ultimate. But other people have authority as well, not just him. Super chat from Jet. Thank you so much for $5. Please do a deep dive on Epstein with Destiny. Seems to avoid the topic completely. Maybe I'll do that. Tom Bombadil, was I prohibited from streaming and commenting over that Hedge debate too? No. I didn't know that was a thing. I was quite literally just hanging out with my kid and watching it on my phone. I don't like streaming while debates go on. I find it ludicrous. You should be listening to the debate, not listening to someone commenting on the debate as it's occurring. Yeah, comments. If you have any documentation to show that, I'm willing to read it. Absolutely. I wanted to talk to Destiny about vaccine mandates because he has strong opinions on that. Andrew tried to comment over on YouTube and got a warning. Well, I've been commenting on it the whole time and I didn't get a warning, but yeah, and that's YouTube for you. I hear you. Provide some documentation that shows that, though, comments. I can't just be like, oh, my friend comments in chat said this, so it must be true. Someone's going to say, yeah, provide proof, man. Let's see the documents. So, yeah, I'm hearing you, but just if you could provide any evidence of that, that would be great. Oh, what's going on? My phone's blowing up here. Just post it in the chat. Or you could post it in my Discord, or you could post it on my X, or you could send it to my email. You keep telling me about this louder milk. Let's see if we can find it.
The gentleman yields.
All right. Here's Son talking to Loudermilk at the oversight. You tell me.
I recognize myself for 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions. Chief Son, since January 6, 2021, you have.
Oh, I didn't play the video.
Testified or been asked to testify publicly before a committee of the House of Representatives?
No, sir.
Did the January 6 Select Committee ask you to publicly testify before their committee?
No, sir.
But you did testify in the Senate, correct?
Yes, sir. The Senate combined hearing, I think it was February 23rd.
Can you briefly tell us about that?
It was a combined hearing. I think it was a really good approach of how to come in and address it. Initially, they did not want anybody that was no longer in their position to testify, which would have excluded myself, Senate Sergeant Arms Stenger, and House Sergeant Arms Irving. And I went and specifically asked the Senate Rules Committee, please let me come and testify. I will testify in person to show up. They changed the rules and allowed me to show up.
So you had to basically force yourself in to even be able to testify before the Senate
Yeah,
committee.
I had to call in somebody I knew there and tell them, I promise you, I will show up in person. I was the only one to be there in person, not on video.
Thank you for your vigilance there. Chief Son, you previously testified on January 3rd, 2020, or on January 3, 2021, 3 days before January 6th. You met separately with House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving and Senate Sergeant at Arms Michael Stenger. And you asked them to approve a request for National Guard assistance on the 6th. Now, this is on January the 3rd. I believe this was in your book that you met with both Stenger and Irvin and requested National Guard assistance to be ready on the 6th. Can you explain what happened in those two meetings with Irving and Stenger?
Absolutely. So on the morning of the 3rd at 9:24 a.m., I specifically went to see him because I know what a big deal it is to have National Guard come and assist us on the Hill. I went into his office again, 9:24 in the morning, went up and immediately went up and said, hey, I'd like to bring in the National Guard to support me to assist me on the perimeter, because when we have a joint session of Congress, it takes a lot of our personnel inside. But immediately, as soon as I asked him, his first response was, I don't know, I don't like the optics of that. And his second response was, besides, the intelligence doesn't support it. He immediately, then we began talking, he said, have you reached out to Mike Stenger on this? I said, no, I have not talked to him about it yet. He said, why don't you talk to Stenger and see what he has to say? So then I left, went over to Mike Stinger's office at 9:35 in the morning, walked into his office, he wasn't there. I came back, he showed up at 11:13, I showed back up at 11:53 and went in to immediately ask him, I'd like to request the National Guard. He said, let's come up with another idea. Why don't you call, do you know somebody at the National Guard? I said, yes, sir, I know General William Walker. He said, why don't you call Walker and see if we need them, how quickly could they get here, and how many people could they send us? So I called William Walker 6:14 p.m. that night. He told me they have 125 people assisting with COVID response. He could reallocate those fairly quickly once he got Secretary of Defense approval and send them over.
Okay. When you met with Stenger, had Irvin given him heads up that you were coming to ask for National Guard?
Yeah, later on, after January 6th, specifically on April 8th, I went and had lunch with Mike Stenger. And I asked him, because it was kind of unusual. He came up with that idea so quickly when I went walking in. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Stenger, you came up with that response fairly quickly for me to call General Walker. And he had told me Paul Irving had called him ahead of time and said, son came here asking for the National Guard. We got to come up with another plan. Pelosi will never go for it. I was floored by him saying that.
Okay, so you don't know, I know this word optics had come up.
Wow. I mean, that's brutal there. That's even worse. That Stenger told him that Irving, who answers to Pelosi, told Stenger, who answers to McConnell, no, we can't send the National Guard. Pelosi will never allow it.
Several times in the past, or in different contexts. Do you know if Irvin had discussed that with Stenger, if what a possible response would be?
I have no idea, sir.
All right. Around 2 p.m. on January 6th, you joined a call with Metropolitan Police Department Chief Conte and National Guard representatives. According to Chief Conte's transcribed testimony given to the Select Committee, you asked the National Guard to send assistance on that call, and he didn't hear the military people respond to your plea. Is that what you remember?
No, he heard clearly the military respond to my plea and say they recommended against my request for the National Guard. Robert Conte immediately butted in and said, let me get this right. You're denying the chief of the Capitol Police? And again, he just, I can go farther into that if you want.
Okay, thank you. Are you familiar with the term data miner?
I have become familiar with it, yes.
Yeah, and according to a book by Carol,
Thank you so much, Grader, for the cheer.
And reached out to Senator Angus King, warning him about violent rhetoric for January 6th. Some of the intelligence included references to smuggling guns and other weapons into D.C. One message said, let's burn Senator McConnell's house down while he's in it. Another one, seemingly addressed to members who supported certifying the election, said, we're coming to kill you. just wait a few days. Did General Milley ever reach out to you and share these concerns with you of any of this intelligence?
No, sir.
Do you know if he reached out to either of the sergeant at arms?
I have no idea, sir.
Would this intelligence have helped the Capitol Police prepare for January 6th?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just to finish up on the previous question, line of questioning regarding General Milley and his...
By the way, special shout out to Comment in the chat for directing me to this. This is good stuff. And under oath, which Destiny demanded.
Notification to the Senate of this particular intelligence. You had stated that he did not notify you. Do you know if General Milley notified the Intelligence Division at all of this?
I have no idea, sir.
Okay. From what I recall, and I believe it was in your book, you had issued an all-hands-on deck for officers to be present and on duty on January 6th. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Do you know, was that order put in place with the Intelligence Division?
The Intelligence Division actually, it's funny you say that. The Intelligence Division had 2/3 of their personnel working from home that day, so no, it was not put in place, and only had one intelligence analyst assigned to monitor the January 6th events.
So even though you issued an all-hands-on deck, this would have been Yogananda Pittman's call. She had nearly 70% of her workforce at home?
At least of that one unit. When you talk about the intelligence, she has a larger work.
That's right. She was over larger. But yeah, so the intelligence, do you know why they chose to not order their people to come to work?
No, sir. I've not been able to follow up on that.
Very interesting. Are there any pre-existing, or when you were chief, was there any pre-existing agreements between the Metropolitan Police Department and Capitol Police that would allow MPD to come onto Capitol grounds without the approval from the chief or the police board?
Well, you got to understand, there's a number of thoroughfares through the Capitol grounds that Metropolitan Police will patrol regularly, Constitution Avenue, Independence Avenue. So they have to traverse the Capitol when you call the Capitol grounds regularly. For them to be coming up and coming into one of our buildings, it usually requires approval and notification for them to be able to come in and be invited in.
From our research, the only directive that we've seen with the Metropolitan Police Department, which dates back about 10 years, is that no officer can come onto Capitol grounds, patrol Capitol grounds, or enter any Capitol building without the explicit approval or request by the Capitol Police Board. So you don't know that there is anything that has superseded that?
No, I don't. I'd have to say that there is a Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments mutual aid agreement that I believe exists, but I don't know how that interacts with that.
The mutual aid agreement that you enacted, is that same mutual aid agreement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What time did you enact that?
I enacted that at approximately 1:51. I called Scott Boggs over at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, but also realized that I did call Metropolitan Police Department right at 12:55. We were attacked at 12:53. At 12:55, I'd called MPD and asked them to send in the resources. I called earlier that morning at 10:55 and asked Chief Carroll if he could put additional resources on Constitution Avenue in case we needed them.
Now, that would have been off to Capitol grounds at that point?
I believe it would have been right on the edge of Capitol grounds. I think
Okay.
it actually technically would have been on Capitol grounds, correct?
Were you made aware that MPD would be sending their emergency services unit in plain clothes to be in the crowd? I'm sorry, their electronic services unit, ESU.
No, sir, I was not aware of that.
Okay. We actually have evidence and records indicating plainclothes MPD officers were on Capitol grounds on January 6th. And you're saying you weren't aware that they would have embedded those officers within the crowd. They didn't make you aware of that?
No, sir, they did not make me aware of it. It's not unusual for agencies to have plainclothes units deployed around major events, but no, I was not made aware that they'd be on Capitol grounds.
Okay, some of what actually Metropolitan Police provided to us, camera footage, body cam footage, shows that there were undercover agents in the crowd, with one apparently encouraging some of the protesters to enter the Capitol. That would, I assume you would think that was uncalled for or unprofessional.
I haven't seen that. If it turned out to be a police officer involved in that would be inappropriate.
Okay. When did you come on as acting chief? I know it was 2017. What month?
January. It was beginning of January, first week of January.
So